CultfiggaTvNews TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host of y'all, meaning of Revolution. We got night classes. Revolutionary salute, family. Y'all be sure to wipe your feet coming into the House of Revolution. That's for y'all who see the program later. Hit the like button, subscribe, show love to the platform. Let's get right into this. The deep state, we know that's the swamp. And dirty Jim Crow Joe and the Democrats is trying to push Nikki Haley. And we got a bunch of scandalous information about her. She been sleeping all around town, and it's out there. She don't got no morals out here. Salute, family. We're going to dig deep into that because the New Hampshire primary is coming. It's up now, and Trump need to beat on her like a drum. She can drop out so he can get right to dealing with Jim Crow Joe. But they are backing her, trying to make her seem like she's a viable candidate. Let's get into it.
The New Hampshire primary, all of that deep state money and media coverage is now flowing one way right into the toilet, right to Nikki Haley. And Democrats are pulling out all stops to keep Trump from winning the New Hampshire primary tomorrow. Now, President Biden, you know it's bad because when President Biden is tweeting in support of Nikki Haley, I mean, and you might not think, oh, this is a tweet that's really in support of Nikki Haley. The hell it's not. He literally is tweeting out her website in images and videos so that people can throw their support behind Nikki Haley. Joe Biden, President of the United States, Democrat, tweeting about Nikki Haley.
Now imagine Jim Crow Joe saying, I don't agree with Nikki Haley on everything, but we agree on this much. She's not Nancy Pelosi. Oh, what a joke. But he won't. Yes, no, she's just like Nancy Pelosi, a war hawk. She just like Nancy Pelosi. She the deep state. She's exactly like Nancy Pelosi. She wants to bomb anybody that the Zionists tell her to.
Really ahead of the New Hampshire primary. Exactly what this is.
Puppet masters of Joe Biden are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, he's not tweeting anything. I read a long tweet or post, an X post, whatever you want to call it, the other day from Biden. I'm like, you didn't write. No one in their right mind thinks that Joe Biden is writing these things out. Someone on his staff, a calculated staff and campaign manager, is tweeting these things out. Tomorrow, of course, is the all-important New Hampshire primary, and the deep state globalists are terrified of another Trump presidency. That's why so many big money globalists and former Jeffrey Epstein friends are coming out to support Nikki Haley, trying to get Democrats to switch their party affiliation to vote for Nikki Haley, and it's working. Reid Hoffman, for instance, the billionaire CEO of LinkedIn, friend of Jeffrey Epstein, came out in support of Nikki Haley, donating a boatload of money to her, and simultaneously, we now know that Reid Hoffman has been bankrolling the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit against Donald Trump, paying all of her legal bills.
Small hat Zionist.
Listen to how crazy this part of the story is. So today, Trump was supposed to be in New York City for this E. Jean Carroll lawsuit in the courtroom. But then at the last minute, that judge decided to delay the court proceedings until when? Well, you think, hey, tomorrow is the New Hampshire primary. If I'm the judge, clearly I should postpone it beyond tomorrow. But no, it's postponed until tomorrow while Trump is supposed to be in New Hampshire. Again, follow the Democrat money right to messing with an election. That's exactly what this is. Any way you slice it, this is messing with an election. So Trump had to leave New Hampshire today in order then to be in New York City, only to have the judge then delay it. So screws up everything for today, for his whole plans in New Hampshire today. Regardless of whatever I don't care if you like Trump or not. I mean, that's not the point. The point is that you're messing with an election.
Well, and also let's talk about the rules of showing up. Hunter Biden decides not to show up to a congressional subpoena.
Right.
Trump shows up when he's ruled to, when he's ordered to, and then they mess with his schedule. So how come, you see how there's
a nice double standard? Yeah. Or if you're Hunter Biden, you can just roll into a court, into a Senate hearing, sit there with your arms crossed,
and then walk out when you want to.
And then walk out whenever you want, even though, you know, members of Congress ask you and give you the floor. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the floor is yours.
Right.
No, I'm leaving.
So, I mean, at least Trump, who likes to say the words law and order a lot, showed up for the law and order, right?
Yeah.
When he was supposed to.
Like I said,
and
regardless
now
of how you feel.
Can I say D word with? He's being D'd around. I'm not going to say it.
What?
Dicked around.
Oh, that's fine.
I said
Dicked?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like,
Okay.
I was running through the profanities in
He's
my
being
brain.
a dude.
He was being D's nuts.
Let me tell you about the dude.
He was being D's nuts. So Trump had to leave New Hampshire today in order to be in New York City, only to have, by the way, he could have been meeting with voters at rallies. And of course, we know how important these few days are right before, especially with all of the independent voters you're trying to woo in that state, right? And this state, perhaps more than any other state, with the amount of independent voters that are up for grabs, it's incredibly important. So these last few days, when you're trying to have that closing argument, only to be jacked around by a judge in New York City that's being bankrolled by a former friend of Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And then it's delayed until tomorrow. So now it's delayed until tomorrow, one day, I mean, on election day. You could have picked another day. The courtroom's proceedings, they got delayed again. So now he can go back to New Hampshire, but then on election day, he's going to have to come back to New York City. Then Trump, because I think he's not allowed to really talk about the judge anymore in this. He's just kind of allowed to talk around it because he's got a gag order against him. So here's what he just posted on Truth Social. E. Jean Carroll was forced to change her story on the Monica Lewinsky type dress. She originally claimed that the event happened in 1994 and that she wore the Donna Karan dress on that day. The problem is that New York Times fact checkers found the dress wasn't even made by Donna Karan until long after 1994. The truth is that she doesn't know the day, the month, the season, the year, or the decade because it did not happen. End this witch hunt now.
Can I just say that's the most legally blonde argument ever, and I love it.
Right. But I love the internet.
You didn't
that
get a
people can figure
perm.
that out.
You didn't take a shower.
That this dress wasn't out in 1994. Like you couldn't, but that's why I love the internet. So the judge knows it's election day tomorrow, and yet you didn't delay it until after the election, which is unbelievable to me. So this money from Democrat billionaires is working. It's working big time.
Well, also, can I just point out that they changed the law in New York just so that they could extend the statute of limitations in order for her to file this case, right?
Good
So
point.
clearly, we don't have we have a two-party justice system. The comment in the chat that just said, stop saying nice things about Trump. We're only here to talk about what's happening. So your interpretation is your own.
Yeah. I mean, again, regardless of your thoughts and feelings about Trump, that's not the point. The point is meddling in an election. And of course, I'm more interested about where the dark money, deep state money is flowing right now. That to me is the most interesting thing. Seeing where the money is, follow the money. That's all I want you to do is follow the money. And who's interested in having Nikki Haley become president? The deep state, the military industrial complex. They want continued war, and they want to keep this massive government apparatus flowing and rolling. And by the way, when you look up here on the screen and you see this national debt, someone in the chat just said, is that really how quickly the U.S. national debt is growing at every moment? And yes, that's the answer. That is exactly how big it gets. And so Nikki Haley wants to send an additional $80 billion to Ukraine. Where's that going to come from? Well, it's going to come right out of your pocket. So,
and she desperately wants a war with China. She wants it so bad she can taste it.
Yeah. Anything to keep her husband out of the house on another deployment. So this money. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think like along with all of that, being the first woman president, she's going to have to feel like she's got to prove she's as good as the guys, right? So she's going to be like, we have to declare war because, I'm going to be in here and show you how powerful I can be as a woman president.
But it's so funny that Donald Trump, is saying we should end these wars, so no more money for Ukraine and roll these wars back. When I become president, he said on day one, I'll, negotiate a peace agreement in Ukraine. So it's kind of funny that she feels the need to be the neocon flag waver right now. Anyway, so this money from Democrat billionaires is working. Chase Bank CEO Jamie Dimon called on Democrats to go out and support Nikki Haley if they want to see Trump. Here's what he said.
What do you think of the two lead candidates right now?
Oh God, I'm not going to tell you.
You're not going to tell me.
I did come out, make a nice statement about Nikki Haley.
You did. You've been talking to Nikki Haley.
Very liberal, yes, I have. Even if you're a very liberal Democrat, I urge you, help Nikki Haley too. Get a choice on a Republican side that might be better than Trump.
Yeah, so get the money out there. Well, he's right. And well, it turns out Democrats listened, and they are coming out in big numbers to support Nikki Haley. And so is all that Democrat money, by the way. New Hampshire's semi-open primary, of course, means that independents can cast ballots alongside registered Republicans. Now, Democrats had to have switched parties or changed their party affiliation back in October. So that deadline was October. But all of the independents, which make up the bulk of the electorate, hundreds of thousands of, I think it's over 300,000 that are up for grabs tonight. And any Democrat-leaning voters who don't register as Democrat but remain independent can go in and vote for Nikki Haley. And that's the main target right now. The Daily Mail interviewed a number of these Democrats who are switching their party affiliation and doing anything they can to stop Trump by voting for Nikki Haley. Here's the Daily Mail headline: Meet the Democrat saboteurs who have registered as independents in New Hampshire to stop Trump. Lifelong Democrat Hella Ross registered as an undeclared last year. She's one of thousands switching so they can vote in the state's primary. We have to make sure that Trump is not the nominee, she said. Here is that Helen Ross. Take a listen.
My name is Hella Ross, and I live here in Rochester, New Hampshire.
So tell us about your thinking for the primary on Tuesday.
Well, my thinking is that I changed my party affiliation from Democrat to undeclared so that I could participate in the Republican primary and cast my vote for Nikki Haley, who I think has the most experience, broad experience, and is the most qualified to be able to take on Trump, because the whole goal is to make sure that Trump is not the nominee.
Okay.
And most of the liberal media is happy to run stories about it because it helps their cause to drive awareness to stop Trump. Here's a way that you can all save our democracy. Vote for Nikki Haley. Even if it means switching political parties, you too can stop Trump. NPR met with a lot of Democratic voters who are trying to stop Trump and vote Nikki Haley. Listen.
Voters like Marie Mulroy of Manchester might hold the key for Haley in next week's primary.
You can't trust those Democrats. I thought they just said Nikki Haley was racist. Nikki Haley just said this. She disrespected slavery. She act like she didn't know the Civil War was behind slavery. All those white Democrats said that. Now when it's time to vote for her to block Trump, let's give her a chance. Maybe we misunderstood her racism.
She's an unenrolled or independent voter who fervently opposes Donald Trump.
He doesn't have a moral compass. I don't understand how anybody could vote for him.
Mulroy leans Democratic and voted for Joe Biden in 2020. But she's so concerned that Trump could be reelected president that she plans to pull a Republican ballot next week and vote for Nikki Haley.
She has the ability to get elected to beat Trump. And the primary goal is...
Nikki Haley has been more of an outstanding racist than Trump could ever be. This is the Democrats right here. They don't give a damn about what black people got to say. They just spent weeks talking about Nikki Haley didn't know what the Civil War was behind. She said it didn't have nothing to do with slavery. They let us know how racist she was. But they think we don't have an attention span to remember that. Now Nikki Haley, they want her to become the president, allegedly. What?
Is not to ever let Trump back in office again, to be honest.
Okay, I understand voting against something. I get it. You don't like this person. He turns you off. You didn't like the Trump administration. But Nikki Haley lies about China. She's lied about Russia, about the war in Ukraine. She is not educated. She is not studied. And she wants...
Nikki Haley said America has never been a racist country. CNN, MSNBC was playing that all day long. How dare Nikki Haley say America has never been racist? Oh, they forgot now. Didn't y'all say Nikki Haley was racist? Come on now.
Or war. So for me, as one of my single issues for voting is who is lying and who is not about war that will lead into more wars. Now, I know I'm not going to lead you to any one candidate, but the media leaves out her warmongering on purpose, only to present her as this angelic alternative to Trump. If you think that, you're not studying.
Well, I spoke to someone today who's like, well, someone said to me, what do you think about that Nikki Haley? She's America first, isn't she? I said, what? Like, if you think about embroiling America in endless wars, then sure, she's America first. If you think about going to war in China, then sure, she's America first. If you think about funneling $80 billion to Ukraine to provoke a hot war with Russia, then sure, she's America first. What is this, like 1984 Rocky IV? Rocky against Ivan Drago? Like, that ship has sailed. We do not need a hot war with Russia. We will lose. That's not America first. Oh, by the way, stay the fuck out of the Middle East. We don't need that either.
No, she likes that.
That's not
She
America
wants that.
first. There is nothing about a war in the Middle East that it puts America first. It puts America dead last, and you will see the destruction of the United States. So
there's a bit of a difference between America first and American supremacy, and what she wants is American supremacy.
Right. Yeah. And
but
what's
to America's
interesting
detriment.
is that the media is starting
Right.
to break down this Putin's a madman. Putin just wants all of Ukraine and Poland too. They're starting to pull back on those lies, but they haven't pointed out that Nikki Haley has not. And maybe that's why they can't lead with this, that she is a warmonger, because then it would point out all the ways that they're having to walk back the lies about Ukraine.
So yesterday, Trump had something to say about all this Nikki Haley Democrat money flowing into New Hampshire. Take a listen.
The people behind Nikki are pro-amnesty. You like that? Pro-China, pro-open borders, pro-war, pro-deep state, and they're pro-Biden. Did you see where 50% of the people that voted for her in Iowa are going to vote for Biden? In other words, they're Democrats. They're voting. Think of it. They're going to vote for Biden. They just had no choice, so they picked her.
They had no choice, so they picked her. I love when he goes off.
Well, he's wrong. They're not pro-China because she's not pro-China. She wants a war with China. Or maybe just no one's listening. No one knows anybody's platform. But you guys, she hates China. She hates Chinese food. She hates everything about China. She's had long diatribes about that.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely pro, and that's where he goes like off his script. Maybe he should stick to a script on that. For context, though, in 2020 primary, Trump grabbed 129,000 votes, which represented 84% of the vote there. In 2015, these are the results here on your screen from 2015. Trump won 34% of Republican voters with 100,000 ballots cast for him. It was a big performance considering there were more than 6 other candidates at the top vying for those votes. Right now, it's a much more narrow field. I mean, just look at these people here on the list, right? You've got all the way down from Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, John Kasich, who put in a pretty strong performance there. Marco Rubio managed to get 1 delegate there in New Hampshire, and then Chris Christie. So pretty big field, as you'll recall, in 2015, and Trump dominated that. Now you have Ron DeSantis, of course, ending his campaign yesterday. What comes next? So DeSantis made a parting shot at Nikki Haley, calling her a billionaire corporate shill that will do the bidding of Wall Street in his farewell address, basically saying that wherever she goes, wherever the liberal money goes, she goes. This was her response. CNN actually had the balls to ask her about this. Watch.
Okay, when he dropped out, part of what he said was he reminded everybody that he signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee. I'll honor that pledge. He, meaning Donald Trump, has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear or repackaged form of warmed over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents. That's tough stuff on his way out the door.
You know, and it's interesting because there's no proof to that. These fellas say this because they want people to believe it. But what's amazing to me is they think they can lie to the American people, and the American people prove it. Prove one thing that they've said.
Okay, prove it. Oh, I'll take that challenge. Prove it. Okay. Well, they say you're taking money from billionaire Democrats, as Ron DeSantis just said. Well, that's true. It's verifiable. All we need to do is look at your super PAC to see where the money is coming from and that you're spending on ads, both in Iowa, New Hampshire, and of course, South Carolina in 3 weeks in the South Carolina primary and ahead of Super Tuesday. Here's Forbes. Democrats like Reid Hoffman donating big money to pro-Haley super PAC, but there are dozens more that we know about. Citadel hedge fund manager Ken Griffin, Home Depot founder Ken Langone, billionaire investor philanthropist Steve Druckenmiller has also urged Republicans to put their weight behind Nikki Haley. The list is pretty endless. Even before she started running, more than a dozen billionaires donated money to get her to run. So we've proven that. Here's something else, though, because she's on this tirade about prove it. I'm not a liar. Prove that I'm lying. Just show me the proof. Here's another thing that she calls out. Watch.
Prove one thing that they've said. Prove the fact that Donald Trump says I want to cut Social Security or raise the age. I've never said that.
Okay, that's another thing you want us to prove in the media. It's a good thing we have videotape. I dusted off my VHS cassette recorder this afternoon, and it's a little squeaky, but I put in the tape, and here's what I found.
Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare is going to go bankrupt in 8. So the way we deal with it is we don't touch anyone's retirement or anyone who's been promised in, but we go to people like my kids in their 20s when they're coming into the system, and we say the rules have changed. We change retirement age to reflect life expectancy. Instead of cost of living increases, we do it based on inflation. We limit the benefits on the wealthy, and we expand Medicare Advantage plans.
What's the right age there then, Ambassador?
Well, I think we have to do the numbers. We've got to figure out what it is. But what we do know is 65 is way too low, and we need to increase that.
So she's never talked about raising the age.
65 is way too low.
Okay, prove it.
Greedy,
prove it. You can't prove that I'm tied to Democrat money, that I'm a shill for Wall Street, that I've wanted to raise retirement age. Just dust off the videotape.
That could have been that could have been her evil twin Ursula. We don't know that for a fact.
Depending on how her hair is being held that day. So it's just too easy. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting. I think in the next 24 hours, we're going to see some real serious money. We're going to see some major moves being made after New Hampshire. You know, Iowa's one thing, but New Hampshire is really to me, one of the big bellwethers. And then, of course, you've got 3 weeks to South Carolina. But remember, New Hampshire, if she can chalk up a win here, and this new St. Anselm poll that just came out shows that she's beating Trump and independents by 1 point today. And so all of this money flowing into New Hampshire among independents and people who are leaning Democrat and are pushing them out to go vote tomorrow, this could be where that money shines and where she actually gets a big win in New Hampshire. And then 3 weeks, of course, goes to South Carolina. It's her home state. Can she pull off something there? Fewer independents to play around with there. But this is why the money is flowing to her so strategically right now, because New Hampshire is such an important part of this, story.
Right. Well, let us know what you think of that in the comments below. Well, we have more news to get to. We're going to
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots going on this week. Ron Desantis officially out of the presidential campaign. Can't say that we didn't call it, but anyway.
Yeah, certainly called it.
Lots to get into there. We also have some intrigue on the Democratic side. Dean Phillips, according to one poll, may be surging in New Hampshire. Biden's having to wage this weird write-in campaign, but also pretend like it's not campaigning. So we'll tell you about those dynamics as well. And then, of course, there are a lot of updates with regard to Israel and the broader war that now is in full effect. We've got news that the Biden administration is planning for a sustained military campaign against the Houthis, although don't call it a war, even though what is exactly
Police
war
action.
if it's not just continuing to bomb and exchange hostilities with another actor. Anyway, we'll get into that. And Bibi Netanyahu continues to humiliate the Biden administration, once again proclaiming, I don't know why this is a mystery to anyone, that he is absolutely opposed to the establishment of a Palestinian state. This comes on the heels of Biden insisting that he thinks somehow he's going to be able to persuade Bibi that they should actually have a two-state solution. We'll tell you about that. I'm taking a look at Malay's speech at the World Economic Forum. Sagar is taking a look at some mysteries surrounding that pipe bomb outside of the DNC headquarters back on January 6th. So a lot of intrigue this morning.
Yeah, that's right. Also, don't forget, Shelby Talcott should be joining us from Semaphore. So that'll be fun. We got a guest in the show. We got 2 monologues. Lots of things are going on here. But we also have a discount currently going on for our election season. We can put it up there on the screen, guys. You can go ahead and take advantage of it. It's for our yearly subscription. You can help us out in the election season to help build. We've got our RFK Jr. focus group, which has been rescheduled after the snow that blanketed the Midwest, also blanketed us here in Washington. And Crystal, you are doing a live stream tonight with a couple of friends that we should flag for everyone.
Yeah, that's right. So myself, Katie Halper, Brianna Joy Gray, we are all
brought the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nick
retired. Personally, never thought it was his best work. I think Meatball Ron was far better, but those are the 2 immediate. Now we've got basically a 2-person race in the state of New Hampshire. Trump kind of making this evident. He's been attacking Nikki Haley now for several days, which has led to a bizarre incident where he seemed to imply that Nikki Haley was actually in charge of security at the Capitol on January 6th. Let's take a listen.
By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley Did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything, deleted and destroyed all of it, because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people.
So we think, Crystal, he was referring to Nancy Pelosi, but Haley now picking up on this and implying that Trump has lost some of his marbles. Let's take a listen to that.
We need a president for 8 years, even if you have a president for 4 years. The man was going on a rant about how I was keeping Capitol Police from going in on January 6th. He went on and on, mentioned my name multiple times about the fact that I stopped people from being secure on January 6th. I wasn't in DC on January 6th. I had nothing to do with the Capitol. It's things like that. He said multiple times that he ran against President Obama. He didn't run against President Obama. These things happen because guess what? When you're 80, that's what happens. You're just not as sharp as you used to be. This is not personal. Y'all know I voted for him twice. I was proud to serve in his administration. This is the fact that we have a country in disarray and a world on fire. And we need to know that we are not giving our kids options of two 80-year-olds going into a presidency.
A little bit more of a general election argument there, Crystal, because I don't think a lot of Republicans feel that he has lost his marbles. But yeah, your overall reaction, DeSantis is out of the race. We certainly did call it. And I guess it's Nikki versus Trump. Good luck to her, I guess, as Trump would say.
I mean, okay, so there's a few things. There's, first of all, the short-term impact. What will it mean in New Hampshire, where we'll get into in a moment? I mean, some polls have shown her in single digits. It seems like the most recent polls have Trump expanding his lead back into double digits. To be honest with you, I don't know that it has that much impact at all in New Hampshire, because Ron DeSantis really wasn't pulling that well in New Hampshire. Is getting like 6% of the vote. So where will that 6% go? Will that be the difference maker? I sort of doubt it. My expectation, we'll do our official predictions probably tomorrow, is that Trump will win New Hampshire and be able to continue that momentum easily into the Republican nomination. So does Ron DeSantis really dropping out make a huge difference for Nikki Haley? I seriously doubt it. Although I have seen some people who are assuming that all of his support will basically go to Trump, and I don't buy that. No, I think it's more split.
Yeah,
I think
it's probably
maybe 60-40, maybe even 50-50. I don't know, but I don't think it's a huge difference maker because Trump has such a large lead. On other dynamics, you know, there's a reason why from the beginning, even before all of the indictments, even before all of this happened, you and I were both very skeptical that Ron DeSantis, even at his best, even after Florida did phenomenal in the midterms and Trump was kind of down and out because all his candidates had, you know, underperformed and the Republicans had underperformed. Even at that moment, we were very skeptical because Republicans still really liked Donald Trump. They still really liked him. And he basically was an incumbent coming into this, the way that they looked at him. You had to give them a big reason to move away from Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis proved himself really unable to come up with an argument. I don't think it was going to be an easy thing to do. I don't even know if it was a possible thing to do that would move people off of Donald Trump and towards him. And in addition, perhaps his strongest argument to make was electability. Look at the scoreboard. Not only did you have the example of him on the campaign trail being incredibly awkward, and also, by the way, running a really poor campaign, I mean, the Twitter Spaces debacle, and people can go through the list, et cetera. But I don't think it gave people a lot of confidence, like, oh yeah, this is the guy that can definitely win. And meanwhile, Joe Biden is so pathetic that you're like, of course Trump can beat him. I mean, anyone who looks at the scoreboard, so to speak, and doesn't think that Trump has a chance to defeat Joe Biden, they're just living in an alternate universe. So, you know, once that was off the table, the potential electability argument, there just wasn't a lot there to work with. So listen, I know a lot of people are being really hard on the Ron DeSantis campaign. There's plenty of material there to work with. But to be honest with you, Trump ran a really terrible, embarrassing campaign in 2016 and he won. The bottom line is Ron DeSantis was never going to be president this time. He's never going to be president, period. He's just not the guy. And especially when you have a Republican Party, and especially when you have a person in Donald Trump who still really defines the center of gravity in both parties and focuses the debate, everything turns around this man in both parties. So without some gigantic situation that was going to move people off of him, which we have never seen unfold in the Republican Party since he jumped on the scene, I think that this campaign, regardless of how perfectly it was run, was basically doomed from day one.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Trump just has the it factor. You know, Ron DeSantis, whether Trump is in or is out, he's not going to be inspiring the same level of just reverence that people have. I mean, take a look at this. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is the line for people to get into the Trump rally in New Hampshire, where the feels like is -1 degree Fahrenheit. It is literally almost.
You have some Democrat stations saying that it was empty seats. They're telling people nobody showed up. They lie so much.
0, -30 under freezing in the state of New Hampshire, in Manchester, where people were lining up for hours to get in there. Hundreds, thousands. You know, I mean, that's just something that you've never seen anything like that in modern politics. And look, the only place you have seen it, Crystal, like you said, is amongst Democrats who are willing to line up. They ain't lining up for Joe Biden. They're lining up to vote against Donald Trump, to chant, you know, wearing the pink hat. Almost said something else there. The Women's March and all those other things. Nothing wrong with that. It just shows you that it's the inverse, right, of the inspiration that he inspires among some voters. Is exactly the same thing that he applies for others. The thing is, as you said too, in the state of New Hampshire, just to back up your point, put this up there on the screen just to give people an example of where the current polling is. Trump is currently at 55%. This is in the latest USA Today Suffolk poll. You've got 36% for Nikki Haley. I mean, it's not bad, but it's definitely still 20-some points behind. DeSantis was polling at 6. That's part of the reason that he dropped out. It would have just been this like humiliating twist in the wind for more than a month until the South Carolina primary and eventually going into Super Tuesday. You know, you don't want to finish before, 3 or 4 points. You want to be able to go out on quote unquote on top after you came in second, possibly curry some favor with Trump. As you said, I don't think all of that's going to go to Trump, although the majority of them, their second choice voter is going to be Donald Trump. They may just not show up to vote. And then I guess 3% or so would go over to Nikki Haley. Now, listen, it's certainly possible. New Hampshire is a tough state to poll. It's weird. Trump definitely overperformed expectations last time, but things have defied some expectations this time around. Obviously, Iowa was a little bit squirrely in terms of where things were going for the exact percentages, even though the Iowa Seltzer poll, but there's no real equivalent here in the state. Plus, you've got the open factor for a bunch of people who may have registered as Republicans to go there. And that's the only reason why she might overperform expectations. But we'll see.
Yeah.
That's the real question.
It's possible.
Right.
It's possible she wins New Hampshire. I don't think she will, but it's possible. I think it is theoretically in the realm of possibility that she wins New Hampshire. If she does, she will still lose every state, including her home state, which is next, of South Carolina, which is, I mean, listen, on the one hand, this couldn't have lined up better for Nikki Haley, right? You have New Hampshire early in the lineup, the very first primary state. That's a great state for her. It's probably the best state in the country for her in terms of potential performance. That's fantastic. Then you go into your home state of South Carolina. What could be a better lineup? She couldn't have planned it better. On the other hand, if you go into your home state of South Carolina and you lose, that's game over, right? That's game over. Now, I really am kind of 50-50. I suspect she probably drops out after that, but I'm not 100% sure. She may stay in there, even though it's completely humiliating and embarrassing to then get like 10 percentage points in every state after that. Just as an option, in case something does happen with Trump that takes him off the field before the Republican nomination, she's the last one there standing. That's theoretically possible. I think because, especially of the timeline of his legal trouble, that is not all going to unfold until maybe before the general election and maybe not even before then. But I don't think any of that is going to ripen before the Republican nomination is settled. So it's probably more likely that after she loses South Carolina, that's the end of the road for her.
I saw someone say, I think it's Harry Enton, who works for CNN. He previously worked for 538. He's one of the better polling analysts. He was like, look, guys, here's the truth. We're shaping up for the longest general election in modern American history. And I think he's right. I mean, basically, we haven't seen something like this. I mean, technically, look, FDR, I guess, certainly had some challengers or whatever back in the day. Probably that's the time that we ever had such a presumptive nominee here and such a presumptive nominee on the other side, even though technically the general election was only a couple of weeks. Where this is, I haven't seen anything like this in a long time, where exactly who both parties are going to be. Technically with an open primary, at least that's what it was supposed to be. Just to give everybody again a preview of the state of the Real Clear Politics polling average. Let's put this up there. So Trump has got plus 15 on average over all of his opponents, roughly in line with what we just saw. 52% average that he's polling at. Nikki Haley at 37.5. DeSantis's average was roughly 7. So we'll see if you equally split that down the middle, you can see it puts Trump right at 55
Yeah.
or so, possibly Haley at 40.
Now, there is one outlier poll that's not listed here from American Research Group. It's not rated highly by 538 for what it's worth. It's like a C+ polling outfit. And they have the race basically as a statistical tie, I think, with Nikki Haley down 2 points, but that's within the margin of error. That's an outlier, but I do want to acknowledge that it exists,
right?
That polling is out there. They use a somewhat different methodology. Maybe they're picking up something that other people aren't, or maybe they're wildly off base. Very hard to say. You know, we'll see what happens on Tuesday night. They also have, and we'll cover this too, an outlier poll on the Democratic side. The Democratic race, very difficult to poll in the state of New Hampshire, because you have Joe Biden not on the ballot. People have to write in his name, and that just makes it for, you know, very difficult to predict how that is all going to go down and, you know, what percentage point he will get in the state as well. But just wanted to acknowledge that that exists. One other thing, Sagar, that I wanted to mention, because we played the clip of Nikki Haley picking up on Trump's like confusing her with Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
And I saw that too, that he like said ran against Obama a couple times when he didn't. I mean, first of all, I do think it's reasonable to say the man is 80 years old, so these slip-ups are going to happen more and more. Like, that's just the nature of aging. It is what it is. I will also say, though, as someone who talks for a living and talks all the time, like, I also make these stupid miscues sometimes, so I don't put too much stock in it. But I will say, politically, not only Nikki Haley, but also Joe Biden is picking up on this.
Yeah,
and to your
that's
point
true.
about the general election has already started. Like, everybody's moved past these primaries basically and assumes it's going to be Trump and Biden, because it is going to be Trump and Biden. Biden picked up on this and was also making fun of it and using Nikki Haley's comments to make fun of it as well. And do I think this is going to, you know, persuade people that Biden is more on the ball than Trump is? No.
according to the report, has been exposed as being a prolific cheater on her husband. Not one affairs, but at least two. And they signed sworn affidavits to the affairs. It is now creeping back up in her campaign. If she believes she's going to get a pass like Donald Trump, she has another thing coming. Here's the commentary.
Seemingly confirming what was apparently an open secret in South Carolina.
A lot of people are not taking this story. Like they talked about Fannie Willis and the cheating. A lot of people are not talking about the story. MSNBC not, CNN not talking about it. They talked about Fannie Willis cheating, more white supremacy. Nikki Haley has been exposed as a prolific cheater on her husband. That's more her hypocrisy. Now we're going to get next into us screaming America has been racist to her, but it wasn't racist to us. We're going to get into that next. But now let's hear about her hypocrisy and cheating on her husband that the news media don't want to talk about.
Reporting from the Daily Mail alleges former governor and current GOP hopeful Nikki Haley had affairs with her communications consultant and a married lobbyist prior to becoming the Palmetto State's chief executive. Two eyewitnesses, Will Folks and Larry Marchant, signed affidavits in 2010 alleging they had a sexual relationship with Haley before she went on to become governor. Haley has previously denied the affairs, though GOP insiders in South Carolina allege the affairs were, quote, brazen and widely known. So, Jessica, this, as mentioned in the opener, were considered open secrets in South Carolina that Nikki Haley had been philandering around the state with members of her party before becoming governor. And I've even heard allegations that it continued while she was governor. Now her husband is in the military and is deployed on occasion. Which
now while her husband is deployed for this country, she's sleeping around. Now I wonder how Nikki Haley rose to the top. I wonder how she become the governor. Now all of a sudden she's a Republican darling. They want her to be president. Oh, really?
Which would give her opportunity. Of course, legally, you have to be careful about what you say. She has denied the affairs, but this Daily Mail report apparently has access to these 2010 sworn affidavits that were previously not available to the public.
According to the report, Governor Haley was getting it in.
Yeah.
Put up the picture full mask.
Yes. But she tried to play like she was wholesome, like she was Little House on the Prairie. Like she just was American darling. Lady, please. It's out there now, man. We know who you are. Lady of the night.
Daily Mail that broke the story. Okay, the Daily Mail broke the story. They have now been banned from the Nikki Haley campaign. They cannot come to events. They cannot ride on the tour bus because, according to the campaign, the publication lied on the presidential candidate. On Friday, a Daily Mail reporter and photographer, they were told to leave the campaign event at a diner in New Hampshire. They were also told they were now banned from covering any future events. That is a very Trump-like thing to do. I understand where you got the move from, Haley, but if you believe that you're going to be treated with the same type of, I don't know, acceptance as Donald Trump was, you got something else coming. Remember, Donald Trump is on record for cheating on his wife. Hell, we got the payment
No, you
stuff.
mean Bill Clinton, brother. You mean Bill Clinton is on record. I know you got to keep your jaw, brother, but don't coon and buffoon. You mean Bill Clinton? Huh? Who got impeached because he was too handsy with Monica Lewinsky? Come on, brother.
Donald Trump is on record for saying he just walks up to women, grabs them by the vajayjay. We have that on recording. What did they do to Trump? Nothing. They made him president. All right. According to the Daily Mail, Haley, a spokeswoman, Cheney Denton, addressed the reporter and photographer, pointed to the door and said, Daily Beast is not credentialed for any more events. I'm politely asking you to leave. When the Daily Mail reporter followed up to ask whether this ban will be in effect for the rest of the campaign, the spokesperson said, yes. According to the Daily Mail, Denton later told an editor that the publication was banned because it was printing lies about the presidential candidate. The ban comes after Daily Mail published a story reporting that Haley lied when denying that she had cheated on her husband. She was accused of engaging in affairs twice during her South Carolina gubernatorial campaign. And listen, the Daily Mail article is quite graphic from explaining where to kind of like hopping in a minivan and letting the seat back and what Haley was doing. It is extreme. All right. It's a lot of detail. Okay. So I encourage you find the article if you can. And naturally, this is going to become a thing because it's Nikki Haley. Now, remember, Nikki Haley says racism does not exist. I wonder, does she believe sexism does not exist? Because already she's being treated quite differently by her party than Trump was treated by that same party when it was exposed that he cheated on his wife. All right, Ricky, thoughts here?
And not a minivan. God,
yeah, minivan, man.
Yeah, that's something, a whole new meaning. I was just listening to Prince yesterday, so I was gonna listen to him today. So now when darling Nikki comes on,
oh man, it's a whole nother situation.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. And if there are affidavits signed that showing that she had that affair, they're gonna really show her what she means to that party, because she's already dealing with racism within her party, and that's why she had to use the name Nikki Haley as opposed to her original name. And now you got this affair out there. I don't think that she will be no threat to Donald Trump securing the Republican nomination. And that's I think if that rumor, remember when they put the rumor out there when John McCain about him adopting black kids when he was running against Bush for that 2000, and just that little bit. Just a rumor, how it messed up the campaign for John McCain back then. So just imagine what this is going to do by her being a woman of color.
Right, exactly. But Ricky, America has never been a racist country, is what Governor Haley told us. So we're going to go with that.
Find out.
Now we got to get into the hypocrisy of Nikki Haley saying America is not a racist country. Remember she said that? But when she was talking about black people, but she experienced racism. Man, you just can't make this up.
With Ron DeSantis out, Nikki Haley has been a serious contender to former President Donald Trump in the 2024 GOP primary. Now, during an interview with NBC News, Haley claimed that she was constantly bullied by her peers in the Deep South for being brown and gave her anti-racist bona fides. Take a look.
We were the only Indian family in our small southern town. I was teased every day for being brown. So anyone that wants to question it can go back and look at what I've said on how hard it was to grow up in the Deep South as a brown girl. Anybody can look at my record and see when Walter Scott was shot down by a dirty cop, how I made sure that the Walter Scott family didn't suffer because we put the first body camera bill in the country in place. Anybody can look at the fact that when we had 9 amazing souls die in Mother Emanuel Church, I did something that no Republican or Democrat ever wanted to touch, which was call for the Confederate flag to come down because it would take 2/3 of the House and Senate and was an impossible feat.
Haley also claimed that she was disqualified from a beauty pageant when she was younger because people couldn't decide if she was white or black. Let's watch.
If you want to know what it was like growing up, I was disqualified from a beauty pageant because I wasn't white or black, because they didn't know where to put me. So look, I know the hardships, the pain that come with racism.
This came on the heels of an awkward encounter between Haley and a veteran.
What she said, America was no racism until it come to dealing with her. Her and her Indian family, they suffer racism, but nobody else except her and her family. What a joke.
At an event in New Hampshire over the seeming futility of her campaign. Let's watch.
Can I ask you just like a tiny question? Do you think it's responsible for politicians to spend like $100 million in Iowa on TV ads, which go to mainly news stations that have lied to us for years, when there's homeless veterans out there that could use that money, when you didn't even come close to beating Trump, and you spent like $100 million in TV ad money?
Do you know my husband's a veteran?
That's fine, but I'm just saying, I'm asking
do you know that
you.
when the media doesn't tell the truth, the whole reason you put commercials on is to tell the truth because the media doesn't?
My point is, you're not going to be Trump, and
You know
all
what?
of the money you're wasting could go to better causes
I
that would
appreciate
make
that.
the Republican Party actually look better.
You know what?
See what I'm
Last I
saying?
saw, it was a democracy. So we're going to keep working
Yeah.
for a good democracy. We're going to work for freedom, but thank you for your service.
But Haley has some reason to celebrate ahead of the New Hampshire primaries. She got a massive celebrity endorsement as TV star Judge Judy gave her support to the former South Carolina governor. The good judge argued that both Trump and Biden were too old for the job and that Haley had the energy and vigor to take on the task. Let's watch.
Joe Biden is now older. I'm not going to get into with you what everybody talks about with regard to his cognitive ability, but I know he's my age. I run a big, and I said in my article, I run a big business. I'm the matriarch of a family of 20 plus. I make decisions that affect hundreds of people every day. I need a nap in the afternoon. So does Joe Biden, probably too.
Beloved TV figure, Judge Judy. That was always on in my household in the afternoons, her show. I was a big fan. That's neither here nor there. Now, you had an interaction about the beauty pageant line on social media, I saw. Do you want to?
Yeah, first I'd like to say that I think Nikki Haley is in a really tough space. Frankly, she has aspects of her record that she should be proud of. Being the governor of a very diverse state where some really horrible anti-Black hate crimes have taken place under her stewardship has put her in a position where perhaps she felt actually morally compelled to do this, or she felt politically compelled to do this. But she did do things like advocate for family members of someone who was slain by a dirty cop, to have more accountability for the police force, to get cameras and body cams in circulation, to take down the Confederate flag, a symbol of the South's desire to secede from the Union to defend the right to own slaves, down from in front of the Capitol building of the Union, by the way, the side that won and that didn't commit treason against the rest of the country. So in any normal world, she would be able to say, hey, look, I'm a conservative. I have XYZ values. I think that the George Floyd protests were violent and there was property damage, and I disapprove of all of that. But also, I'm going to be the president of all the people in America, and I'm not a racist. And I think that the rights and interests of Black people should be defended just like the rights and interests of everybody else in the country. But she lives in a party where you can't do that. And Tucker Carlson has been hitting her specifically on, frankly, very milquetoast statements she made in the wake of the George Floyd shooting. Anything where you basically uphold justice for every member of your society equally can be tarnished by a certain prong of the Republican Party as being a problem. So now, of course, she's having to make these statements defending her record as someone who isn't racist because perhaps because she was trying to pander too much to this base, said that America has never been a racist country. And of course, she had the big blunder on saying that the Civil War was not about slavery, or not saying that it was about slavery is perhaps a better way to say that. And so now she's in this ping-ponging between statements that are seen as cruelly indifferent to race by liberals and moderates who might be interested in her campaign, and things that are going too far to say that race and racism is a problem that alienates the Republican base. And she's in a trap I don't know that she can get out of.
Yeah, I think for people who support accountability for the police, for instance, you can always do better selling it, maybe specifically to right of center audiences, conservative audiences, if talking about, look, there's a benefit. The reason we want body cam footage and all of that is that even if that can help prove the police case, if it's a justified whatever incident, you want the ability to decide for that. Sure. It's a boon to everyone, and ultimately it's about government accountability, something conservatives purport to care about. We shouldn't have totally unrestricted, unaccountable agents of the state who feel that they can do whatever they want with impunity. And frankly, some of the police abuse cases ended up not being particularly controversial. Republicans and Democrats can come together to want reform. That's what happened with Breonna Taylor, who was killed in that no-knock raid, that there was a bill sponsored by Rand Paul supported in Kentucky to end that practice. So when it doesn't become, unfortunately, fraught in some of these stories, there can be plenty of consensus around making changes to save innocent lives and give all citizens the right other citizens have. As for Nikki Haley doing this kind of interview, I mean, I think you're right. It's not going to particularly help her at this point. Is there an insincerity to her that she says one thing for that was a mainstream cable news liberal audience? She sounds one way. She sounds a different way when she's trying to sell Republican primary voters some of the time. Maybe that's just who she is. I mean, look, maybe it's insincere. Obviously, she's trying to cater to two different segments of the population. But the problem is that there are two different segments of the population, that her base in particular is divided on the issue of whether it's a good thing to support the civil rights of Black people. She shouldn't have to. Look. Tucker Carlson is literally repeatedly dinging her on the idea of saying that after the country collectively watched a man get strangled to neck kneed and suffocated to death on the pavement for 9 minutes, and polls showed that everyone thought that was horrific and a terrible thing to have to witness and to have happen. The argument is not over that. It's over whether riots that destroy. No, but that's not what the fight is about. I mean, it is. She said. It's literally not, Robbie. He specifically keeps referencing a specific Nikki Haley tweet because Nikki Haley condemned the protests, the riots, whatever you want to call them. Nikki Haley went hard in the paint saying how much she hated everything about 2020, just like every Republican. But she made the offense of having one tweet where she said, wow, this is a horrible thing to happen. Maybe this is a moment of reflection for the country. And Tucker Carlson took that and ran with it and said, she's trying to make white guilt a thing. This isn't a moment for the country to reflect. This is just one person who did a bad thing. Well, right. The position is, why is it the country's fault? Why is it our fault? Why is it my fault? When a rogue police officer kills... It certainly wasn't my fault. For reasons that were not proven to have anything to do with race. It's not my fault. I don't think she's saying it's my fault. I'm a member of this country too. I'm an American. And when she says she says in her tweet, it's a moment for us all to reflect. Yeah, I'm reflecting. That doesn't mean it's my fault or that I should have white guilt. Newsflash, I'm not white. So why is it that Tucker Carlson reads into a statement that applies to us all, or don't leave it?
Who cares if you don't agree with her statement?
Well,
But it's trying to make a national case of the idea that she is too soft on what? On Black people? On too sympathetic to civil rights issues?
I mean,
It's too woke?
the entire media and activist community read into it a racial episode where it didn't even need it didn't necessarily have anything to do with race. It was a example of police abuse of a citizen that was totally uncalled for and should be is not in the training and should not be in the training, that there was no need for that officer Chauvin to be kneeling on someone for that length of time. The person was already secure, could have been handcuffed, put in a cop car. It was cruel and negligent and resulted in an unnecessary death, and that should not happen for police officers. And and everybody basically agreed on that. It was not necessarily, it did not call for some kind of racial reckoning, and it certainly didn't call for.
The reason there's a racial reckoning, Robbie, is because Black people are disproportionately killed by the police. And I'm happy to have a conversation about how economics are such a huge predictor for who gets killed by the police.
Black people disproportionately have interactions with police.
But the reality is, I'm telling you statistically, factually, that the biggest predictor for having a negative interaction with the police or any interaction with the police at all is your class status.
Right.
And because Black people are disproportionately poor in this country, yes,
that's what I was just saying before you cut me off.
But it doesn't mean that there's not still a disproportionate effect on Black people from police violence. That's why it's a racial issue. And you can broaden it out and say, we need to keep the police from gunning down, shooting, molesting, harassing poor people. And we absolutely should say that.
For anyone.
No, not anyone. We're not all lives mattering this. They're attacking poor people disproportionately. We should care as a country that we have a state-backed force that disproportionately harasses and strips liberties away from the poorest among us and the most vulnerable among us, regardless of race, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the question with Nikki Haley is, and the problem with Nikki Haley is, it's very difficult within the Republican Party, especially I think as someone who's not white, to get away with saying anything that's even moderately sympathetic to the interests of historically marginalized groups in this country without being characterized as a patsy in the bag for those groups, or trying to do great replacement theory, or trying to hurt white people at the expense of other people. When Nikki Haley refers to herself as brown, I've seen all of these internet comments where folks are like, brown, she's making up brown. It's so deeply ignorant. There's a billion people in the world that identify as brown. And it's like, it's wild to watch this weird racial reckoning that's happening around Nikki. He's occupying this unique position as a brown person. It's not some middle ground between Black and white. It's an identifier that Indian people use to describe themselves racially, just like Black people aren't literally Black and white people aren't literally white. That brown people, a brown person is in this position where she's trying to earn the trust of a party that frankly has some racial reckoning that it needs to deal with.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for us.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is coming for former President Donald Trump over his recent comments surrounding Russia's war with Ukraine. Over the past year, Trump has repeatedly said he would solve the war if reelected.
So Zelensky, the cokehead, and it's so much. I'm bringing y'all some bunch of information on Ukraine tomorrow. It's so much going on over there. They're losing so bad. It's all crumbling. They could be overthrown at any time. He trying to get rid of his generals. His generals are on his head. And Trump just said the other day, if he get in office, the war gonna end. He bringing it to an end. They sitting down. It's gonna be peace agreements. Zelensky hate that because the Ukrainians want him in jail immediately for the 600,000 dead women having to fight, elderly people, the economy gone.
Pledging, quote, "I will have it solved within one day, a peace between them." The former president also suggested it would be an easy negotiation between Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin, per The Hill. Zelensky called Trump's rhetoric, quote, "very dangerous," and also invited Trump to Ukraine.
Would you invite him to Kyiv to come and visit?
Pleasure.
With pleasure.
Invite him now. Invite him on.
Yes, please. Donald Trump, I invite you to Ukraine, to Kiev. So if you can stop the war during 24 hours, I think it will be enough to come to Kiev.
All right.
In any day.
He already say no, he don't want to meet you. Trump already said no, Zelensky, stop begging. He don't want to come meet you. You in that damn war. Then he'll sit down. There's nothing to talk about. He don't need to see you.
Make sure that he gets the message. Yeah.
Meanwhile, at Davos, U.S. Special Representative to Ukraine, Penny Pritzker, made the case for a pathway for Ukraine into the European Union.
Long-term pathway into the EU and NATO. And that combination is extremely powerful when it comes to reconstruction. Then you add on top of it the world's richest soil that's capable of feeding the world and inexpensive IT specialization. And you add those capabilities, you add all those qualities together, that makes this a
what did you say? The world's richest soil. Yes, that's true. Ukraine absolutely does have some of the world's richest soil. You can mix it with other soil and grow stuff. It's just so magnificent. Remember, that's the soil Hitler wanted. Putin is in control of that. That soil is on the eastern side of Ukraine. They don't have access to that soil no more.
particularly compelling situation. The challenge, of course, is we're in the middle of a war. So we've got to deal, of course, with the first situation before we can deal with the past, but we don't have to wait. The situation in Ukraine, the way I think about it, and it's because I'm a runner, I think about it as a sprint and a marathon. And, the goal is a long-term, sustainable, digital, clean, competitive European Ukraine integrated into global markets. That's the marathon.
The concern isn't that you're in a war to kind of on-ramp Ukraine into the EU and NATO. The concern is that the war is largely precipitated by extending this carrot of Ukraine joining NATO in the first instance. And a reminder that if it had been a member of NATO, the implication of Russia's involvement would mean a full-scale war with our involvement and arguably World War III. So to be so very cavalierly trotting that out in this kind of a elite context at Davos, is it just widely out of touch? Is there an indifference to the reality of the conditions that precipitated this conflict? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, the case for Ukraine being in NATO would be, theoretically, for the people advocating that, would be to prevent Russia from invading it.
Right.
But that already happened.
Right.
So do we think if Ukraine was magically in NATO now, what Russia would be like, oops, we have to withdraw? We'd be committed to defending them. That seems like a disaster. That's without even asking all the questions about whether they qualify for membership in this organization, whether their institutions are sufficiently robust from a democratic standpoint, and all of that. We've talked about all the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, political freedom issues going on there.
Jailing journalists who died in Ukrainian custody, we covered last week.
So says he wants to have a negotiation between Putin and Zelensky and end the war in 24 hours. I don't know if he can make that happen, but it certainly sounds good to me. Nice to have goals for 2024. And as we've discussed, there was a plan for negotiation for peace. Zelensky should welcome that because he can't hold out forever. Ukraine its people are being killed, destroyed, the army, the military age young men, thousands and thousands of deaths for maintaining the entire sovereignty of this country. But there has to be a negotiation. We are past the point, so many in the U.S., where we want to continue fund this resistance effort. We're at a point where approve more funding. It's possible that kind of deal comes through if Republicans get what they want on the border. But a lot of Republican primary voters don't want to do that anymore. Obviously, there's dissatisfaction in your corners of the political realm with what's going on there. It's really past time to consider negotiation, and the fresh perspective of a Trump-like figure. Who knows?
Well, it didn't seem from the tone, if I can do just a little bit of reading between the lines, that Zelensky was especially confident that Trump's pledge that he could to wrap this whole thing up.
But Zelensky
in
doesn't
a
want him
day.
to, right? Because it's going to involve negotiations that probably have to do with the disputed territories no longer being in Ukrainian hands. So what I read in there was he was actually worried of the prospect of Donald Trump achieving exactly that.
I guess I don't read it quite that way. I do think that Ukrainians are now in a difficult situation where they've been led on under false pretenses to engage in a war and incur all these costs that don't put them any closer to a place where they can have a better negotiation position than they did a month into this crisis, when they had the full commitment and support of the entire world, monetarily and kind of psychically.
Right. And when they had won some military battles against Russia, Russia's efforts stalled more than expected.
Right, which is also when there were attempts at negotiation that were scuttled by the UK and the United States of America. So, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine. I don't think that's a scenario where they want war to continue. But I do think there's this interesting push and pull now where do you stop now at a point where you're least advantaged, because the people who drew you into this less advantaged position are no longer willing to give you money. I mean, kind of morally, it's a very difficult, troubling place to be in. Just for some background, we have the United States has already committed about $75 billion to Ukraine. In October, Biden requested an additional $60 billion in military aid. There has been intractability here because the Ukraine aid, the Israel aid, and border funding are all being tied together in one package. And what we saw with the leadership battle in the House with Republicans is that I do really think that there is a lot of pressure on Mike Johnson to listen to and capitulate to the base of the Republican Party that is very negative on the idea of increasing aid to Ukraine. Although the majority of the Republican Party is very much aggressively wanting to do that, that's in one corner. The kind of collective interest in resolving the border crisis is in one corner, but there's also some resistance there because Joe Biden is proposing, frankly, very, I don't know what other word to use other than conservative border policy that there's resistance to within the Republican Party. I think because in that case, I think there is a political benefit to being able to keep arguing the border crisis isn't being resolved. There's nothing being done on the border. If they can hold up money that Biden wants to send to fund border agents and the like and ramp up basically security at the border, then that helps them electorally going into an election year. So there are different political reasons why each of these need to be held up. Of course, I think there's a very big bipartisan consensus on wanting the Israel aid to go through. But even there, I do think there's a creeping realization that the base's frustration, or should I say disgust, with the sheer death toll numbers coming out of Israel are a real political liability for him as well. So it's going to be very interesting to watch how that bolus gets resolved.
Right. Meanwhile, and a lot of in the Republican Party, there is obviously more support for helping Israel, for being close with Israel and giving aid. Although there is also a healthy non-interventionist contingent on it. But that means that this money being spent toward Ukraine seems, I think, even additionally wasted, because there are some conservatives who don't want to spend any money, which I'm more sympathetic to, I'm more ideologically in cahoots with, don't want to spend any American tax dollars on foreign wars or overseas security for other nations, so that you have that part of it. And then you have the part of the right that wants to spend that specifically with Israel, and it feels like the Middle Eastern situation is more important for American interest than this dispute between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, I mean, and back to the Ukraine piece of it, Biden's top aides are privately saying, this is according to reporting from NBC, that Russia could win the war in a matter of weeks if this funding doesn't come. Now, that could just be a rhetorical dance used to try to pressure people into pushing an aid package through. But it also is a really interesting signal to be putting out there that, of course, Russia can read this as easily as I can. And what level of desperation does that telegraph if they're saying that out loud?
It sounds like all the Democratic fundraising pitches everybody gets on their phone. Like, hello, Robbie. Hello, Brianna. This is Nancy Pelosi. Do you have time to dollars, or the MAGA agenda is about to triumph, or whatever it is?
Right. Lives are on the line if you don't send this money.
commander here, he gets asked a question about our ongoing attacks on the Houthis. Now, remember the context here. The Houthis, who basically are in charge of run Yemen, they're basically now the official government in Yemen, have been blocking the Red Sea in opposition to Israel's bombardment and what they and I describe as a genocide of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So they've been doing that. The U.S. decided that we had to get involved here. We had to protect commerce on the Red Sea. And so because our initial response wasn't working, we decided to go that step forward and start bombing Houthi facilities in Yemen without congressional authorization, by the way. So Biden gets asked about this. Hey, is this working? Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Working. Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Okay.
I mean, this is such an incredible admission. I guess he's like too elderly to come up with a lie on the spot, so he just tells the truth. But Sagar, it's just remarkable how U.S. foreign policy, like, what is it even about?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, he's admitting they don't even have an expectation that this completely foolish and dangerous escalation that they've decided to engage in here, they don't even have an expectation that it's going to work. We know from the reporting, not only has it not worked, it hasn't damaged the Houthis' offensive capabilities significantly. It has not deterred them whatsoever. If anything, they have scaled up the attacks since we started bombing them directly. And you have more cargo ships than ever rerouting outside of the Red Sea and avoiding this area completely because now it's an active war zone. Gas prices immediately once we announced this bombing campaign went up. We talked last week about how Shell is saying we are not bringing our ships through here whatsoever. So it has been completely, wildly counterproductive. They know that. He admits it, and yet it's still, yeah, but we're going to keep doing it. This foolish, stupid, counterproductive policy for no reason whatsoever.
If I were to describe blob foreign policy, blob, by the way, is like the nickname for, Washington establishment thinking. I would actually put this as the perfect example where it feels good, right? We're like, well, these guys are going to fire at our ships and we're going to take it right to them. I have nothing against that as long as it works, but that's the issue. It's got to work. And it always feels good to drop a bomb, to drop, a couple $1 million or whatever in ordnance. Everybody gets to play with their toys and we get to watch some cool videos online. But then you're like, but now what? Did the bombing actually stop? And we brought everybody the news that in general, the offensive capability had been only slightly reduced. It didn't take a genius. I said it from day one. I was like, look, Saudis carpet bombed these people for 9 years. They haven't been able to do any real, real destruction to their capabilities. It also, though, exposes what the word war means and what the Pentagon actually has the disdain for the American people, for the democratic process. This was the perfect example where a Pentagon spokesperson was asked, is it fair to say that the U.S. is at war with Yemen? And look at the way that this woman twists herself into knots to avoid the obvious answer of yes. Let's take a listen.
Is it now fair to say that the U.S. is at war in Yemen? And secondly, there are some reports about a U.S. MQ-9 being shot down by Iranian-backed militia. Is that something you're tracking?
Thanks, Idris. I'll take the last one first. I have seen those reports. I don't have anything for you on that. So I'd have to circle back with you. I've seen those reports, but don't have anything to add. In terms of your first question, no, we don't seek war. We don't think that we are at war.
Just to follow up on Idris's question,
Yes, you do.
so that we are not at war with the Houthis, but if this tit for tat bombing, we bombed them 5 times now. So if this isn't war, can you just explain that a little bit more to us? If this isn't war, what is war?
They liars. It's war.
Sure, Laura. Sure. Great question. Just wasn't expecting it phrased exactly that way. Look, we do not seek war. We are not at war with the Houthis. In terms of a definition, I think that would be more of a clear declaration from the United States. But again, what we are doing and the actions that we are
America
taking
having
are
declared war in
defensive in
Israel.
nature.
I love those grizzled Pentagon reporters being like, all right, what is war then? They're like, what? And here's the thing, she actually gets the right answer. The correct answer is one that is declared by Congress. And yet, what are we finding ourselves in? A tit for tat campaign. The problem is that, as Ro Khanna articulated on our show about offensive capabilities, that was clearly an offensive action. It was described as such.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing. And that's why previously in incidents where the Houthis had approached like a US ship and we fired back at them, people were not upset about it from a congressional point of view, because it's obviously an act of self-defense. Somebody's shooting at you and you shoot back, that's a different story. But when you're actively trying to remove their offensive capability, then that's not the same thing. And you have to get some congressional authorization for that. And the problem is that the only sign right now from Washington is that we're going to increase. And as we have said previously, if you want to just solve this via air power, it's not possible. We're going to talk, I think, tomorrow a lot about the assessment, the U.S. military assessment of the Israeli military campaign. You can drop as many bombs as you want to on some of the most densely populated regions on the planet. You still can't kill everybody. Guess who found that out? In Japan, the United States, in our war with them. There's a reason Japan had to surrender. We got militarily conquer the entire island, because even though we could kill 100,000 people in a single night, it's still very, very difficult in order to remove total enemy infrastructure and all of that with bombs alone. That's why the plans at that time called for a ground invasion of some 250,000 troops or something crazy. So at the end of the day, you want to solve this militarily, there's only one option. We got to occupy Yemen. I don't think that should be on the table. And yet this seems to be, honestly, I think that seems to be the more likely scenario than something else, than an actual negotiated diplomatic solution.
And it is so important anytime we talk about this to remind people that if we just force Israel into a ceasefire and use our leverage to push them to the table and to end these hostilities, this all stops. We don't have to occupy Yemen. We don't have to bomb Yemen. We don't have to do any of this. And we know this because when there was a brief negotiated ceasefire, the Houthis all but stopped their attacks. All of the, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, all of these attacks stopped during the ceasefire. So we know that this isn't just, they're claiming it's about Israel. It's really not about Israel. No, it is about Israel. It is about what Israel is doing in Gaza right now. And yet that is taken completely off the table. And you are lead to the U.S. foreign policy establishment, even going against the Rand Corporation is like, this is a stupid policy and it's not going to work. Clearly, Joe Biden and co know that. And yet they feel like we have to do something and we have to be the tough guys. So I guess we need to wage a war, but not go to Congress to make it an official war. And speaking of that, let's put this up on the screen from the Washington Post. Apparently, the U.S. is preparing for a sustained bombing campaign, but definitely not a war, just a sustained bombing campaign. I'll read you some of the details here. The Biden administration crafting plans for a sustained military campaign targeting the Houthis in Yemen after 10 days of strikes failed to halt the group's attacks on maritime commerce, stoking concern among some officials that an open-ended operation could derail the war-ravaged country's fragile peace and pull Washington, love that terminology, into another unpredictable Middle Eastern conflict. I love how we just get pulled in like it's a force of nature. Like there aren't options on the table, somehow being pulled into war with any choice or other possibilities. It's just insane. They say they don't expect the operation will stretch on for years, like previous U.S. wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria. At the same time, Sagar, they acknowledge they can identify no end date or provide an estimate. Yemen's military capability will be adequately diminished. As part of the effort, U.S. naval forces also are working to intercept weapons shipments from Iran. And it was part of that operation that led to, we now have confirmation, 2 U.S. Navy SEALs died attempting to intercept Iran to. So it shows you this is not costless whatsoever, not in terms of treasure, not in terms of, and certainly not in terms of global stability, let alone Middle East
stability.
It just used. Remember, Chris? Do you remember when those soldiers died in? I think they were Green Berets in Niger, and there at least was an uproar over that.
Yeah.
People were like, "What the hell are a bunch of Green Berets doing in the middle of the desert, getting into a firefight with ISIS?" To this day, the entire thing has been covered up by the Pentagon.
Oh, they absolutely lied about what really happened.
Those
there.
guys were left out in the cold. There was some crazy stuff that happened at command. People should have been prosecuted. What happened to those men, but that's a whole other story. Now, the same level, though, of scrutiny on this, I don't see it. 2 U.S. Navy SEALs were killed in action. Now it appears in this mission. One of them, I mean, is a genuine hero who jumped in after one of the guys slipped off of the ladder
So they say
and was carried off in heavy swells away. And their bodies have still not been found. They've been declared deceased now by the Pentagon. And the problem is that this is only ramping up. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is a terrifying thing that happened just a couple of days ago. So the main U.S. base in Iraq was, I love the headline, attacked by Iranian-backed rebels. Okay, but that's not the headline. The headline is that, quote, multiple ballistic missiles and rockets were fired by these militants from Western Iraq that rained down on the base. Now, the reason why this is different is it's the first time so far that multiple ballistic missiles have been used against U.S. troops inside of Iraq. And what's even more troubling is that 15 Patriot missiles were actually fired to intercept these ballistic missiles and to shoot them down. Guess what, guys? Of those 15, we can put that up there, please. Each one of those costs $4 million. That means that we fired $60 million in ordnance. And what's even more terrifying is that these so-called piddly rock missiles are just coming from Iran that they've been able to assemble without sanctions. They were able to get past our Patriot missile defense systems. So we fired $60 million in rockets, and multiple of our troops appear to have suffered traumatic brain injuries. And I believe one person was actually injured directly. That should terrify the hell out of all of us. A, our weapon systems don't work as well as we thought. That's number one. But two is that these guys are sitting ducks. And with the amount of technology now available to many of these Iranian-backed groups.
Understand what they just said. Now, they just told you the Patriot system didn't work in Iraq for us when some militias fired some rockets and stuff they had learned how to use from Iran. But they want you to believe that the Patriot system is working in Ukraine when Russia is firing advanced missiles at them. No, they're not. But they keep the lie together. They try to keep the lie going. Why? Because they don't want people to stop buying Patriot missile system. It's all business. It's all business. But now U.S. military personnel is wounded. And when they say head trauma, they done. I mean, irreparable damage. They just call it head trauma. Boy probably don't got a head right now.
This, to me, was a perfect preview of how much of a nightmare and how almost certain regional war is likely if Hezbollah does enter the war, because they've got technology actually, frankly, even more advanced than this. And this is another thing where things are all ramping up. The Houthis obviously are Iranian-backed. You've got these Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. They've got ballistic missiles and much more advanced technology. We do not have that many troops who are in Iraq right now. And then the question is, Iraq, too, is in a major diplomatic problem. They're negotiating with us over our presence in the region.
Yeah,
but
they don't want us there anymore.
They don't want us there anymore. But
they negotiate. No, they want you to get out because you're stealing their oil. Act like you're fighting ISIS, but you're the terrorist. No, it's not. They're negotiating with us. No, they told you to leave.
Okay, the Iranians tell them not. Whatever. It's a different story. My main point is just that there's a lot at stake.
I'm finna say the Iranians tell them to tell us to go. They're a sovereign country. They don't want you there.
And basically everything is being disrupted around all of this. And you're right. I mean, the center of gravity for this is Gaza. If the ceasefire were to stop, or if the ceasefire were to go into effect, then a lot of this would ramp down.
Yeah.
That's not really an option that's currently being floated by anybody really in the American establishment. And what really disgusted me was John Kirby, the spokesperson for the Pentagon, who went on Good Morning America yesterday and downplayed the TBIs that were suffered by these U.S. troops in this attack. Here's what he had to say.
What can you tell us about potential injuries to American troops in Iraq, and how will the U.S. respond to this latest attack?
Well, as we understand at this early hour on Sunday morning, it's only a very small number of U.S. troops that were affected. They're being seen for traumatic brain injuries with some symptoms of concussions, but no serious physical injuries other than that. Not that that's not serious enough. Of course it is. But we understand it's a small number and it's limited to traumatic brain injuries. Obviously, we're going to do what we have to do to protect them. I mean, these attacks have to stop. And we've made that very clear.
Just a very small number, Crystal. This is from the same people who believed Havana syndrome, who believed that Russians were shooting secret microwaves into U.S. diplomats' ears, and they passed how many millions of dollars in health. That these are our servicemen who are sitting there getting missiles rained down on them. And he's going on national television, a former admiral in the U.S. Navy, to downplay traumatic brain injury, which last time I checked is actually one of the worst things that can happen in combat because it follows you forever. Yeah. You have no idea the personality changes that could come. I mean, there's all kinds of downstream effects that these guys may have to live with for the rest of their life. How can you feel, being sitting there, you have missiles raining down on you, and the freaking Pentagon or the press secretary go on television and just be like, oh, it was a very, very small number. I don't even care if it was, if it's just one, so what? Every one of their lives and all this matters. It's just the entire purpose of the government, because they don't want to acknowledge even if there's any option or the failure of their strategy. Yeah. We're downplaying. I mean, it's repulsive.
It is repulsive. Yeah. Just a little traumatic danger. Imagine that's your son or daughter.
I know. Yeah.
Just see this man out there. And, I was saying this to you, Sagar, the other flacks for the White House, the other shameless propagandists and liars that they employ, they at least look a little squirrely, like a little uncomfortable when they're faced with the utter lies and propaganda that they have to continue to promote. Not this man. No shame there. None whatsoever. He will just go out and proudly lie and spin and misdirect. And it is disgusting. And that article that we put up before, it has an astonishing statistic in here, which I did not realize, because we've tried to cover these attacks as much as we can because they are incredibly dangerous. This particular assault, which was one of the largest since October 7th, this was the 144th attack on U.S. troops stationed in Iraq and Syria since October 7th. 144 attacks on U.S. troops in the region. I mean, first of all, this again begs the question, why are all these people still in the region? That's number one. Yeah. But number two, what are we doing here? I saw another commentator say yesterday, listen, even if you do not care a bit about Palestinian lives, even if you are not repulsed by the videos of 15-year-olds having to have their legs amputated with no anesthetic, even if that doesn't move you whatsoever, what possible U.S. interest is being served by this policy? What possible end are we pursuing? And this is the insanity to go back to the original comments from Biden, where he acknowledges, are the bombings of the Houthis working? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. It's the same thing with our policy with regard to Israel. You had Tony Blinken just recently come out, Sagar, and say, there is no military solution to Hamas. I mean, it's true. It's obvious. But then what the hell are we doing? What are we supporting? We're the ones sending the 2,000-pound bombs to drop on the Gaza Strip and destroy infrastructure and murder civilians, mostly women and children. And we're openly acknowledging, well, we know this isn't going to work. Then why are we doing it? Why are we supporting it? And it shows you the level of complete insanity and disconnect from reality that has taken hold among the DC blob establishment. That they will bomb, they will, ship weapons to murder civilians, knowing that not only is it not going to work, it is actually going to achieve the opposite end of what you claim to support. Because the Houthis have never been more popular locally or around the world than they are right now. Hamas has never been more popular in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank than they are right now. Every civilian murdered in Gaza is likely a new Hamas or other militant member. They know this. They know this. And yet they continue to pursue the policy anyway. If that's not the definition of insanity, I don't know what is.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's all blob politics. Everything feels good. Everything is about obscuring actual national interests. Crystal, as I said, I am a big fan of talking in the language of national interest, because when you do talk to Americans, people are pro-Israel. I would say in general, for people who are pro-Israel, if you were to talk to them, be like, do you think it would be worth sacrificing U.S. lives and, U.S. military in order to fight for them? They'd be like, oh, no. And it's like, well, what if I told you that American troops have been, fired upon 114 times? People are like, well, that'd be a little bit of a problem. Look, it's only a matter of time. And I hate to say it. We've already got 2 dead who've been killed. These brave heroes in this interdiction mission. It's only a matter of time. Ballistic missiles and all this stuff flying around, this amount of ordnance, somebody's going to die.
Yeah,
and
we
when
are
they
lucky that it hasn't happened already.
We are so lucky that it hasn't happened before. And it's just purely a matter of chance. 114. 144 attacks. Once we get to 200, like, what are we doing here? And it just gets worse and worse already. I've seen some of the images of some of these ships that have come out of the Red Sea.
Yeah.
This is no joke. I mean, go back and look at the damage, for example, of like the USS Cole back in 2000. I mean, a lot of sailors died in that attack. It's only a matter of time, before something like that is allowed to happen. And that was just a tiny little skiff or something. These guys have advanced military technology. And yes, as we see with the Patriots, we can shoot some of them down, but ask Ukraine, you can't shoot everything. And it's like, it only takes one, and you can do a hell of a lot of damage. We can see it in Israel, we can see it in Gaza, we can see it, in Kyiv and everywhere else that's been targeted by these things, and a lot of people can die.
Welcome to the Gray Zone. It's Max Blumenthal. The Ansar Allah movement controls the majority of Yemen after fending off a brutal US and UK-backed military campaign led by Saudi Arabia. After Israel began its blood-stained assault on the besieged Gaza Strip this October, Ansar Allah, known popularly as the Houthis, enacted a naval blockade targeting Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea as a means of putting pressure on Israel to end its attack on Gaza. The Biden administration responded with attacks of its own, striking targets across Yemen.
Yemen working. Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Just days before the Biden administration announced plans to add Ansar Allah once again to the State Department's list of terrorist organizations, and issued its intent to escalate military attacks on Yemen, I spoke to Mohammed al-Bukhaiti, a senior political officer and spokesman for the Ansar Allah movement. Mohammed al-Bukhaiti, welcome to the Gray Zone. What are your military objectives with this naval blockade in the Red Sea, and how do you intend to achieve them against some of the most powerful militaries on the planet?
In the name of God, the All-Merciful, our goal is a simple one: to stop the genocide that is happening in Gaza, and to help get fuel, food, and medicine into Gaza. And we have suffered a similar plight starting in 2015 till today as the Yemeni people. We suffered equally from strikes and a siege. That's why we cannot allow these crimes to be repeated. And of course, if any other group had been suffering what the Palestinians are suffering now, we would have equally supported them. Therefore, our position is a moral one, and our war is a war of morality. As for the massive difference in military strength between Yemen and our enemies, Israel, the United States, and the United Kingdom, we don't act based on our internal strength, but rather based on the support of God the Almighty. And everyone knows that Moses, peace be upon him, had triumphed over Pharaoh with a stick. As we know the story of Suleiman's victory, and the story of David's slingshot that defeated Goliath. Therefore, we don't fear but God Almighty, and we don't fear the weapons of the enemy, whatever they may be.
You've said the awareness battle is more important than the military one. What did you mean by that?
This war that we are currently waging has a special nature. The moral impact of this war is much more important than a militaristic one. That is why we believe that a victory on the awareness front is much more important than a military victory, because the main cause of suffering from wars around the world is a result of a lack of awareness. And we know that there are a lot of good people in this world, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and any other European country. These good people, if they found out the truth, their positions would change. I, for one, lived in the Netherlands for 7 years and was a member of the Dutch Socialist Party, where I was an activist for the Palestinian cause. I also lived in Canada. That is why I know that there is a lot of good in these Western countries and communities. The problem we run into as people trying to achieve justice in this world is the lack of unity and coordination between each other, fear in our spirits, and the lack of awareness amongst the masses. That is why we believe that Yemen's victory in this battle is a victory for morality and the highest values.
The Houthi movement slogan is "God is great, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam." Right now, there are hundreds of thousands of people across the West, Christians and Jews, who support what you're doing to put pressure on Israel to end this brutal assault on the Gaza Strip. So how do you square your slogan with the support that you're receiving from Christians and Jews across the West? And what is your message to the people who are out there protesting right now against Israel's attack on Yemen?
First of all, this slogan was written in January of 2002, during the American invasion of Afghanistan, during which America committed numerous crimes against the people of Afghanistan. Therefore, that slogan was a reaction against these crimes and a response to Bush's slogan, "If you are not with us, you are against us," and his slogans in which he evoked the language of a modern-day crusade against Islam. So when Sayyid Hussein Badruddin al-Houthi launched this slogan, he said that its goal was to kill the fear within our spirits. This slogan is not a call for the murder of American citizens, nor for the killing of the Jews, but an expression of anger against the foreign policy of the United States and the West in general. The call was against the governing elites who ran these countries and occupied Washington and London. And this is well known amongst all the members of Ansarullah. I personally escorted a number of American journalists to Sada in the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. And as we were walking around the city, people recognized me. When they saw the foreigners with me, they would ask about them and ask where they came from. I would tell them that they're American. They would get surprised, of course, but tell me to welcome them. They would add that they are not against the American people, but rather the American government and its destructive foreign policy. The slogan was also used as a reaction to the Iraq invasion, an invasion that brought about such tragedy. As for the curse the Jews line, this exists in the Quran, the Bible, and the Torah. And I think the translation is more accurately damn than curse. And the idea behind this word comes back to a big problem. That there is a sanctification of the Jews and Judaism in Western world. Not only to repay the Jews for the crimes of Hitler and the Nazis and the other European powers, the sanctification is also happening to justify the Jewish oppression of the Palestinians and to strip the Palestinians of their rights. That's why we notice that any movement in the Western world in support of Palestinian rights is always countered with evocation of the Holocaust in Germany. Therefore, the aim of the slogan is quite simple: to kill the fear within one's spirit, as we say in Yemen, to break the barrier of fear for others as well. While we emphasize again that this slogan is not a call for the murder of the American or the Jewish people. Even though America, the United Kingdom, and Israel have killed millions of Muslims and Arabs, they did so either directly or by spreading discord or by backing corrupt Arab governments and making these governments fight one another, like what happened in Iran in 1980 and what happened in Yemen in 2015.
You've said that you're happy that the United States and UK are attacking Yemen directly rather than doing it through a proxy like Saudi Arabia. What did you mean by that?
The United States and the United Kingdom pushed Saudi Arabia and the UAE to wage war against us. They also pushed many Yemenis to fight amongst each other. Therefore, this war cost us a lot, as it was both an internal and a regional war. And it was a war against the interests of both the Yemeni people and the UAE and Saudi Arabia. It was a war for the interests of America, the United Kingdom, and Israel. In fact, the US benefited greatly by selling weapons. That is why we prefer the direct confrontation with the United States and the United Kingdom over the indirect war with their agents in Yemen or their allies in the region. And this is reasonable, because the Yemeni people have now united in the face of this new aggression. Add to that the fact that the Muslim and Arab people stand with us. The people of these countries, and even people in the United States and the United Kingdom, are equally standing with us. Whatever sacrifices we give now, it will not come close to what we lost during that internal war. Finally, the indirect war was much more ruthless and difficult than this new direct war.
In 2019, as Saudi Arabia continued to wage war on and besiege Yemen, Ansar Allah attacked Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure. Doing something like that right now would bring the global economy to its knees or make significantly greater impact than just simply blockading certain shipping in the Red Sea. So why has Ansar Allah not returned to that tactic? Does it have something to do with this new relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is eager to negotiate with Yemen? Or is there another reason?
The aim from those attacks that targeted the Saudi gas pipelines was to force Saudi Arabia to stop waging war on Yemen and to retreat its forces from Yemen. Therefore, at that point, both the Saudi and Emiratis realized that continuing the war in Yemen was no longer in their interests, and stopping the war became a joint aim in the region for both the Yemenis, the Saudis, and Emiratis. At that time, there was a Saudi and Emirati push for peace. Unfortunately, however, American pressure on the Saudi and Emirati governments led to a failure of the peace process. So the ceasefire ended, and we entered a phase of reduced escalation. Today, we don't have a ceasefire, just a reduced escalation status quo. For us, we always make sure that the military option is the last choice we use after exhausting all other options to make peace. That's why we hope that Saudi Arabia and the Emirates re-engage in the peace talks in order to achieve the points already agreed upon. We hope they do that without hesitation, as this might work against them, especially if the war expands. We are also closely monitoring the extent to which Saudi Arabia is aiding the US and the UK in their new war against us. And we emphasize once more that any Saudi or Emirati aid to the US and UK in their attacks against us will lead to a direct response against Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
The US government says that Ansar Allah is controlled by Iran. They say that Iran or the IRGC guided your decision to blockade shipping in the Red Sea. So how do you respond to that? And how would you characterize Ansar-Allah's real relationship with the Iranian government and the IRGC?
There are crimes of genocide happening in Gaza, and there's a siege that aims to starve the people of Gaza. Therefore, a question begs itself. What is required of the nations of the world? The nations of the world must act to stop these crimes. America's accusation that our actions are directed by Iran is an attempt to distract global public opinion from the main crime of genocide in Gaza. These accusations are also irrational and baseless because these crimes of genocide are taking place in Gaza. They are not taking place in Tehran or Isfahan. Iran's stance is a moral one because Iran is equally seeking to stop these crimes. Therefore, the accusation that Iran is moving all those morally opposed to the Israeli crimes is actually a great compliment to Iran. As if Iran is the only country with any virtuous values or noble humanitarian goals. We assure everyone that our decisions in Yemen are independent. The decisions of Palestinian resistance movements is also independent. The decisions of Hezbollah are also independent. While it is true that what unites us is a similar goal, to liberate Palestine, to end American hegemony in the Middle East, and to liberate the world from the gang of Zionist leaders that seeks total domination of the world, every country has its own independent decision. Also, if we had relinquished our decision-making to Iran, I would assure you that Yemen would have not chosen to directly confront the Zionist entity, nor to confront the direct aggression of the US and the UK.
There has been a deliberate plot by the West to divide Yemen over the past several decades. And we saw throughout the civil war that you waged that countries like the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia would come in and sponsor political parties to further divide the country. How are Yemenis, including those outside Ansar Allah, responding to your campaign, your military campaign against Israel? And is this promoting more unity across a country the West has sought to divide for so long?
Certainly. The crimes of genocide in Gaza has woken up the conscience of the world, not just the Muslims and the Arabs. That's why our actions in support of Gaza have satisfied all the people of Yemen, including those who are fighting us on the front lines. I also add that the US and the UK strikes on Yemen strengthened the national unity and increased the global sympathy towards both the Palestinian and Yemeni people. That's why I think that the US President Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's decision to wage war in Yemen is justified and a decision that is not in the interest of the United States or the United Kingdom. Biden and Sunak took that decision for electoral reasons and not for strategic ones. Yemen won the first battle round for the awareness in this war from the first engagement. There will be a lot of shifts in the near future in both Yemen and the broader region, because this war has become clear for all. A war between right and wrong, a war between good and evil, a war between the defenders of the weak and the defenders of those who commit genocide. That's why the losses of the United States and the United Kingdom will be massive, and not only in the short run, but also in the long run.
To this point, how much damage, material damage and damage to your military capacity have the US and UK airstrikes achieved? And do you think they can actually prevent you from continuing these operations?
The US and UK strikes were inconsequential because Yemen was ready for such a confrontation. Also remember that Yemen had been in a state of war with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. both of whom used American and British weapons. They received logistical support from American and Israeli experts in target selection, intelligence gathering, and information systems. Therefore, the UK and US entering the war didn't bring anything new for us. That's why we are sure that Yemen was not damaged when it came to its military forces. Rather, some military bases were targeted, which led to the martyrdom of 5 members of the armed forces.
In closing, what is your message to the Arab population living outside Yemen, especially those living in countries that have made deals with Israel or who have issued some interest in normalizing relations with Israel?
رسالتي للشعوب العربية أننا نطمئنهم
My message to the Arab people is that I am confident that Yemen will continue its operations against the Zionist entity. It will continue until the genocide comes to a stop and the siege is lifted, whatever sacrifices we have to make. In a normal world, it would be expected of the Arab people to sympathize with the Yemeni people and support them, because the Yemeni people are now directly facing the United States, the UK, and the Zionist entity. However, the situation is the exact opposite. We are the ones sympathizing with the Arab and Muslim people, because as Yemenis, we are comfortable waging this fight whatever sacrifices it costs us. And the pain we feel from watching the suffering of the Palestinian people is alleviated by our actions. That is why we have to console the Arab people and sympathize with them, because they are suffering immensely as they watch the crimes committed against Palestine without being able to do anything about it. And we, of course, thank them for their support for Yemen's decision to defend Gaza. As for the Arab leaders, my message to them is that the wind of change is blowing and will reach them in the future if they don't change their policies. Of course, all the Arab governments sympathize with the Palestinians, but they don't dare move against the Zionist state because they are afraid. But if they don't take action from now on, maybe these winds will reach them. That is why I advise all Arab and Muslim governments to be proactive, because if they remain inactive, they will lose in the long run. There is rage in the Arab and Muslim streets. The resistance in Palestine has broken the barrier of fear and showed the weakness of the Zionist entity. So did Hezbollah and so did Yemen. My message to the protesters and those supporting us in the US and in the UK is to keep going. Our fight is one, whether we are Muslims, Christians, or even Jews, to defeat the gang of Zionist leaders in Washington and London, a gang that has caused a lot of suffering in the world, whether in South Africa, in our region, in East Asia, or even in Europe now, regarding what is happening in Ukraine. Everyone knows that we did not support the Russian intervention in Ukraine, despite the fact that the Ukrainian government had supported the attacks on us and on Gaza, because we differentiate between the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people. Our position is clear. Even though many advise us to declare support of the military operation in Ukraine, that said, we hold the Zionist leaders in Washington and London responsible for the tragedy occurring in Ukraine, a tragedy that impacts all, including the Christians. Even the Jews who were gathered and sent to become settlers in Palestine, they are partially guilty while being partially victims, because they've been placed at the front as fodder. We all saw the Palestinian lady and the Jewish settler from New York, where she asked him, Yaakov, you know that this is not your house. And he responds candidly, if I leave this house, another will come. And truly the Zionist leadership in Washington and London find someone to replace Yaakov if he were to ever return to New York. And when she said to him, you are stealing my house, he responds, if I don't steal it, someone else will. The Zionist leadership in Washington and London will take care of it. Therefore, that Jewish settler, as well as being guilty of stealing what's not his, is also a victim. He could one day turn into a Netanyahu, and if he doesn't, his kids will. That said, we emphasize that our actions are moral ones. If any group had suffered what the Palestinians have suffered, even if they weren't Arabs or Muslims, we would act the same way.
Mohammed al-Houthi, senior political officer.
Salute, family. Let's see what.
Let's go to the next one. This is Gaza City, and this is a remarkable situation in Gaza. Which ones? Oh no, sorry. This is one more from Sheikh Radwan. This was yesterday in Sheikh Radwan, the same area where the tunnel operation took place. Now we're seeing here a combination attack. We see the troop carrier. That's a Shawaz, the explosively formed penetrator bomb, being remotely detonated. See, you can see the Yasin hasn't been fired yet. So they're now doing complex attacks where they're setting off a Shawaz device against the tank and then hitting it with then hitting it with a Yasin, which is this, and they're showing here dog tags from the soldiers from the burning armored vehicle that they have just hit. And so we're seeing these videos that don't match Israeli death tolls. Their casualty counts in the last 2 weeks, basically since the new year, they basically aren't recording them. They're dripping them out dribs and drabs again. We know that there's situations like this where there's 6 and 8 soldiers. That's a troop carrier. There's 12 soldiers in that troop carrier, and they're showing 10 dog tags. So how did they get 10 dog tags out of a troop carrier? Where's the rest of the force? Where's the evacuation force? The numbers of Israel's dead are clearly a lie. And just like October 7th, eventually these statistics will come out and the truth will come out. So this was also in Sheikh Radwan. And now let's go to the next one, Tamar, number 4. This is an Israeli drone, their flagship drone. That's their flagship tank. And that's them inside the tank watching the drone footage. This is their brand new tank. They're showing us here the active protection system, the trophy system that they say protects all their tanks. Now we're seeing the Palestinian fighters coming, using an attack tunnel here to come up right beside the tank and blow it up. Without the active protection, you can see it moving there. It moves, but it doesn't detonate. So the Israelis vaunted technology. Here's their drone, tens of millions of dollars. This is their flagship drone, the Hermes 900. That's the flagship tank, the Merkava. They're showing that they get 24/7 live intelligence, and they have on top of their tanks a secondary protection system besides their armor. Palestinians using an attack tunnel and surveillance to negate and
defeat. To our brother Steve O.D. for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. I appreciate the donation, brother. Salute.
This tens of millions of dollars of Israeli technology that they
is that tank behind like a sand berm or
so they are using their bulldozers to create sand berms around all of their vehicles because they can't trust anywhere that they sit. But here the Palestinians are monitoring this, and so because of that surveillance on the ground, they're able to get to the exact spot where it doesn't matter if you made a berm. It doesn't matter if you have active protection systems. And those hits are happening on the turret of the tank. So there's armor, or there's ammunition inside there that you're seeing going off. There's 8 people in that tank being hit. And then look at this footage. Where's this footage from? This is Israeli soldiers in the back of their tanks. Where did
which
get
means
that footage?
well that means they got the mobile. It's proof that they got the mobile phones or the cameras from the Israeli soldiers along with the dog tags and
along with the dog tags, and we'll show
so
captured here. We can assume that they have this kind of footage. They're literally showing us right here live drone camera footage. The drones that fly that we hear constantly in the background of every single report are filming and sending them live to their phones on this operation, exactly where to go. And they're being defeated by Palestinians who are in their own neighborhood using their own weapons that they built themselves and targeting these tens of millions of dollar products, drones, tanks, active protection systems. This trophy system is something that Israel wants to sell to the whole world for them to put on their tanks. And what we're seeing here is 1980s technology, landlines, Soviet era anti-tank weapons being used by the Palestinians to defeat this tens of millions, billions, right? We saw them on October 7th defeat $1 billion fence and completely collapse the southern, the Gaza division and capture their brigade and division commanders. And the entire day, we know, October 7th, the Israelis had no idea what was going on all day because Qassam knocked out these systems. So that's just footage from Gaza City that shows you that. The connection from the drone to get the 24-hour footage, live footage, and it doesn't matter. Qassam is still defeating them using their technology and their systems and their fighting battle plan, which is defeating the Israelis who only can target schools, blow up schools and hospitals, and make TikTok videos of arresting elderly men who are sheltering in a United Nations school during a genocide. History is not going to reflect well on this at all. And the heroism of the Palestinian resistance, both the civilians and their steadfastness, but also their military, that all Palestinians after this war are going to be proud of in a way that Israel, I just don't think, is calculating. Abu Ubaidah said it. They're creating a fighter in every house, an enemy in every house with what they're doing, just with what Israel's doing. But they're also creating fighters because people in Palestine are seeing their national army successfully defeating the American, proxy, the Israelis. So I think on a lot of these fronts, there's a lot to be seen that's not shown in the Western media about the resistance to this genocide.
Yeah, could I just chime in quickly? Just to mention for viewers and listeners, the Hermes 900 drone that you mentioned is, of course, manufactured by Elbit Systems, the Israeli arms manufacturer that has been a target of for campaigners, for anti-arms trade campaigners such as Palestine Action, and it was the Hermes 450 which was actually involved in some of the so-called friendly fire incidents on and soon after October 7th, which killed Israelis.
Yeah, it's their flagship drone. It's a surveillance drone and it's an attack drone that fires Hellfire missiles, and it's a murderous device, and it's constantly in the air, ready to strike. And yeah, the parts are built outside of Israel as part of this supply chain, imperial supply chain that we've seen bringing airlifts of weapons multiple times a day, C-130 cargo ships dumping weapons that are then dropped on the Palestinians. Yeah, let's go to number 6 tomorrow, and we'll watch this because the Palestinians have drones too. So this is Palestinian drone footage, Palestinian surveillance footage. They're able to monitor these Israeli positions, and they're able to rig up a complex operation, firing mortars from multiple different places, based on the drone footage that they're showing their own fighters. So the Palestinians have this capacity too. Like, look at that shot. They have overview with that drone of the Israeli position. So I just wanted to throw that one in there just so that we could see that the Palestinians have that capacity too. Let's go to number 7 tomorrow. And again, this is Palestinians moving through. They're able to move through the buildings in their own neighborhoods. We're seeing tactical gear coming out, which makes sense as they're defending these areas. This is an ambush right there where we saw last video where the Israelis poke holes in the wall. That's the Palestinians coming and shooting at those sniper walls. This is a thermobaric warhead being fired. And if you notice here, they're on the beach. This is an area that the Israelis said that they conquered 8 weeks ago. and that there was no access to. And now we're seeing soldiers in a window, classic Israeli move, along the beach. So we see now Palestinians having the ability to strike along the beach, which is something we haven't seen for months. The longer the war goes on, the more capacity the resistance has, not the less. And then here we go for this thing, Ali, what we were talking before. These are the captured gear. They captured a drone. They captured guns. These are parts of the of the armored vehicles that are blown off. So we can imagine that they're getting cameras from this.
Yeah, yeah. John, I mean, that same video, I assume it's going to loop around again. But when you see them firing the RPG at the distant apartment building from another apartment building, these are unguided missiles. How? I mean, I don't know how much experience you've had firing RPGs, John, but I mean, this takes a lot of skill, doesn't it, to hit a window that now to look. I mean, look at that. That is a long distance. That takes a lot of skill and training.
They clearly trained, and there's no doubt about it. We see occasional misses, but what's really stark in these videos is that they're hitting this window. Watch this window. From that distance, they're hitting it. And that's a thermobaric warhead. That soldier is killed in action, and he's not being reported in the Israeli casualties. So at some point, this guy and his family are going to be told that he's dead, but we're not hearing about that right now because the Israelis believe that they can lie their way to a victory by pretending that they don't have any casualties to keep the morale of their conscripted army high while they're decimating their economy by having all of these not very good soldiers getting defeated clearly by well-trained, disciplined Palestinian guerrilla fighters who have clearly trained for years with these weapons and are skilled. So here we see them monitoring where the sniper position is, and that's the Palestinians shooting in the hole. You can see them shooting inside the sniper hole. So even the Israeli sniper positions are exposed. This is, again, that's the beach. That's the area that the Israelis were driving jeeps and taking journalists on tours of. Now we're seeing in January that the Palestinians are able to access that area and fight, which is why the Israelis are pulling out. They want no part of staying in this. They want to have a fake victory and say they've wrapped up the war in the north. And they're saying that they're almost wrapped up the war in the south as well, which is just clearly not true. Let's move to Khan Yunis. So we can see here with the captured gear that's where they're getting
they didn't destroy
their helmet cam footage from. Here we see in Khan Yunis, we see an attack tunnel being able to get within, I don't know, what is that, 20 meters of a tank? That's too close for the active protection system to engage. So that's a hit on that tank. There's a tank crew in there that now needs to be evacuated somehow. And the Israelis have talked about 2,000 helicopter evacuations. But you're seeing, look at that footage, look at the proximity that the Palestinian tunnels are getting their fighters up. And that's hitting a Puma engineering vehicle. That's actually a vehicle looking for tunnels. And then you see the piece of the warhead fly over top of them. The proximity that they're able to get from these attack tunnels is just a clue of what exists when the Israelis say that there's 725 kilometers of these tunnels. I believe that we're barely scratching the surface here of the capacity of the resistance, because these tunnels go all throughout the Gaza Strip. So anywhere these forces are, and you can see in the Israeli field reports that they're talking about circumstances where dozens of fighters are emerging from tunnels and fighting them from all different directions at the same time. And we'll get these testimonies from the Israelis. I'm sure we'll hear from the breaking the silence people after the war who will keep all through the war, and then after the war say they regretted it. And they'll tell us the stories of it, right? They'll tell us what it was like, how scary it was to have fighters coming up all around them, and that they never know where anybody is because they're fighting these ghosts.
There are already quotes in the Israeli media from soldiers who are, just quoted anonymously saying that they're like ghosts and we don't know where they come from. That's already out there.
let's pretend tomorrow. So now we have here one of the reasons why the hosts. Sorry, this is going to be 11. It's okay. Let's do this one. This is a shot at an Israeli minesweeper. Okay, here we go. So there we go. Soldier in a window being monitored from across literally the street. And that's another killed in action that we haven't seen reported. And now if you watch in the bottom center, we're getting another hand delivery, another precision guided missile, a Palestinian emerging from a tunnel in the tall grass and placing a Yasin warhead underneath the turret of the tank, which will explode beside the ammunition in the top turret of that tank. And so we're seeing Palestinians again hand delivering explosives, monitoring from literally across the hall, like across the alleyway, and hitting these soldiers that are confirmed killed. There's no way that's a survivable situation, and there's no report of that from the Israelis. There again, we're looking at hand delivering it, pointing the Yasin charge. So here he's using a Yasin warhead that's not part of the RPG. And so they're able to use their Gaza-built munitions in multiple different ways. And we've seen just in this footage that I've shown you, multiple different warheads that they've created that are appropriate for the different circumstances. We saw the thermobaric warhead be used against the troops in the buildings. We've seen the fragmentation warhead be used against troops outside so that pieces of shrapnel fly off and hit them. And then the Yasin 105 that we've seen battling tanks this entire war. And as Abu Ubaidah said, and Nora quoted in the beginning, they've just the Qassam brigades alone have targeted 1,000 vehicles. So even if you take a miss percentage and you can come up with whatever number you want as your miss percentage, you're still talking about significant numbers of tanks being put out of commission by these weapons built by the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And we haven't found in Israeli field reports anything like finding weapons factories on the scale that would answer how 13,000 rockets have been fired during this war, how there's enough Yasin warheads to supply their troops all over from the north to the south of the Gaza Strip, and apparently no shortage of these weapons 3+ months into the war.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our
But you are really not smart enough to know who I am. But soon you're gonna know who I am. Very easy.
Wow, very easy. The entitlement.
No, believe me, I'm much better than that.
The entitlement, guys. Wow.
All right, guys. So the illegal immigration crisis is getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay, as you guys just saw there, apparently there are illegal immigrants from the Middle East at the border saying, soon you will know who I am. Okay, in response to being questioned about who are you, why are you here? Okay, what are you doing here at the border? Are you trying to come into the country illegally? It seems like this guy is making threats against the United States.
Imagine imagine that some terrorists. Soon you will know my name. You under arrest, buddy. Your ass is dead. What that, a terroristic threat?
This is the type of stuff that has people concerned about the illegal immigration crisis, not just the fact that clearly and obviously it takes up resources, but also when we're talking about security concerns and safety concerns. Again, the illegal immigration crisis is so bad, okay, and it most definitely needs to be fixed. And it's so obvious that it's bad and it needs to be fixed that even John Fetterman can admit on CNN that, yeah, we need to address this issue. We actually do need to attempt to secure the border. Take a look.
Because obviously a lot of progressives on Twitter have been attacking you for your position on Israel, for noting that, in your opinion, saying that there is a crisis at the border does not make one xenophobic. Why do you think you've been so criticized by so many progressives?
I honestly don't understand. I don't understand why it's controversial to anybody to decide that you're going to stand with Israel in this situation. I honestly don't understand why it's controversial to say we need a secure border. I've been very clear. In fact, that was weaponized against me as Republicans in my race, that I'm very much a strong supporter of immigration. And, you know, my wife's family, that's the Oregon story about that. And I think two things can be true at the same time. You can be very supportive of immigration, but we also need to have a secure border. And I think about immigration as we want to provide the American dream for any migrant. But it seems very difficult when you have 300,000 people showing up encountered at our border to do that. And I think we need to do a reset, and we have to work together and develop a new comprehensive solution to that. And that would also unlock a lot of the critical aid for Ukraine. Again, we cannot forget about Ukraine. That's critical for Israel and Taiwan. That's a very important kind of standard that we have to maintain, that we're going to support and stand with our allies that are very critical.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, even somebody like John Fetterman, who at one point was not in a complete state of mind, even he can see that, hey, the border should be secure. Okay, you have Joe Biden having disastrous poll numbers across the board when it comes to this issue of illegal immigration. However, it seems like Biden is not fighting to secure the border. He's actually more focused on fighting with Texas to try to make it easier for illegal immigrants to come in and to stop Texas from being able to secure their own border because the federal government has failed to do so. And the Supreme Court just ruled today with the help of conservatives, Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Roberts, to allow the Biden administration to make the border less secure. Take a look.
Court here by a 5-4 decision allowing the U.S. Border Patrol to remove razor wire that was deployed by the state of Texas at the border. This is while the legal challenge to this dispute now plays out in court. Right, Joan?
That's right. And we've been waiting for this decision. This has been going on for several weeks, where the state of Texas, Governor Abbott has been blocking the Biden administration Border Patrol at the border in Texas. You know, this is a long simmering immigration battle, and it arose from a lower court judges blocking the administration from taking down the razor wire. And today, by a 5-4 vote along largely ideological lines, the Supreme Court has allowed the Biden administration to continue having access to the border and to take down that razor wire. And let me tell you about the split, Boris and Brianna. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh all dissented from this order. Now, this all started in December, and since early January, the Biden administration had been urging the Supreme Court to intervene and to block the order that kept its border control agents from getting to a stretch of the border along the Rio Grande and to continue taking down this razor wire. And we know how contentious this has been, but it's also been the kind of situation that has caused a lot of injury and deaths. In the middle of this controversy, a woman and 2 children drowned, and the Biden administration said it needed access to this area and to the river for safety reasons and frankly, to carry out the Border Patrol's mission.
Yeah, so there you have it. Okay, the Supreme Court has effectively ruled that they're going to allow the Biden administration to continue to make the border less secure because they don't want Texas putting barbed wire at the border, because apparently barbed wire is dangerous for the illegal immigrant. Again, you can't really make this stuff up. The Biden administration is fighting tooth and nail to try to make sure that the border is less secure. You would think that barbed wire at the border would be something that we have by default, right? We shouldn't make it easy, okay, or safe to cross the border into the country illegally. But again, this is the idiots that we have in charge. They want to make it safe to cross into the country illegally. No, we should have deterrence. If you make it not safe to come into the country illegally, then you have less people showing up to the border, okay? And we wouldn't have the crisis that we have with deterrence. But again, the Biden administration, it seems like this is what they're doing on purpose. And the result of that is chaos, especially in these liberal cities that are getting a taste of the border crisis because Texas Governor Greg Abbott has gotten smart and started sending the illegals to these cities. He's been doing that for a couple of years now, and it's getting out of control, right? Happening. There are violent incidents that are occurring because it's where they're fighting for the reason away from prayers, and it is becoming deadly. Okay, so without further ado, I want to play this clip here of a fight, a mass brawl that broke out at one of New York's migrant.
Questions tonight over the safety and living condition of a migrant shelter on Randall's Island.
All right, the latest incident caught by our camera involves a woman being carried away after suffering some sort of medical incident in the freezing cold.
This comes after a man was stabbed yesterday. Jessica Formoso has the latest.
A police presence was visible tonight on Randall's Island, a day after a man was stabbed in the neck. Cell phone video given to us by a migrant shows the chaos. This woman had just walked in when she saw the victim screaming for help. The man was stabbed. He was screaming, saying he was stabbed in the neck by one of the security guards. She did not want to be identified, but says a group of Venezuelan men got into some type of argument that escalated into a fight.
Yeah, again, so this is what happens when you let a bunch of single military age men come into the country. Okay, I mean, what else do you think was going to happen? Okay, these people don't really have jobs. They don't have ways to provide for themselves. And I'm not saying that they should be provided that, because that's just going to incentivize more illegal immigrants to come into the country. But I believe that you should not have this situation occurring, because they should have been let into the country in the first place. These people are not seeking asylum in a way that I feel is honest and sincere. These are economic migrants. They're over here for better opportunities and jobs, not because they're being politically persecuted. If anything, I think when you talk about seeking asylum, we shouldn't just be allowing military-age males to seek asylum any type of way. No. If you got a problem, what's going on in your country, you got to do what all men throughout history have had to do when it comes to handling those situations. You got to stay there and you got to deal with it. Like, that is the right of a man, right? That is kind of how it goes. It sucks. It's too bad. It's so sad, but that's just how it goes. When we're talking about asylum seekers, if we're going to be allowing people to seek asylum in our country, we have to prioritize women and children. Okay, women and children. So again, we shouldn't have these shelters full of single military age men, because we shouldn't even been allowing them to seek asylum in this country in the first place. Not any type of way, not easily, right? Not as easily as, a woman or a child, right? But again, because we have an ass backwards way of doing things, this is what you have. A lot of these shelters are full of military age men. And what happens when you have a bunch of military age men, all sleeping together and trying to fight over resources? Well, stuff like this happens, right? Chaos and destruction.
Security got involved. You can see them in the video wearing the yellow vests. 18 people were arrested.
Este es el albergue de la matazón.
They call this place the death shelter, said Angel, who arrived in New York Friday morning. He was placed here at Randall's Island, but says from the moment he walked in, people told him to watch his back.
Antes que me vaya a pasar algo a mí.
Before something happens to me, I'd rather be somewhere else. I'm going to ask to be transferred to another shelter, or if they can get me on a flight to another state.
Wow. Imagine coming all the way from Venezuela or wherever they're coming from to the border, and then getting busted in New York, and then getting to the shelter and be like, damn, I'm in just as much danger as I was from the place that I was coming from, right? That to me seems to be what's happening, right? You got to sleep with one eye open. That's not any way to live. To me, again, this is why I say that it's not humane to just let everybody into the country and we can't really take care of them. We don't have the resources to take care of them. The humane thing to do would be to tell them, hey, look, we can't take everybody. It is what it is. We're sorry, but, hey, you might be better off in your own country than here, especially considering how cold it is. These people aren't used to these types of freezing temperatures. They're not used to it. We don't have the resources to handle it, right? So, I feel bad for some of the migrants, but at the same time, hey, this is what happens when you try to enter a country illegally. And unfortunately, the United States, again, we don't have the resources to take care of all these people. We just don't.
Migrants we spoke to say they sleep with one eye open and one eye shut, fearing they will be attacked. This stabbing comes less than 2 weeks after a 24-year-old man was stabbed to death inside this same shelter. We reached out to City Hall asking if they are aware of how unsafe some migrants feel, but we have not heard back. As we were out here reporting on the stabbings, our camera caught the moment a migrant woman suffered a medical emergency. She was unconscious, just kept having seizures, said this migrant who came to her aid but did not want to be identified. The young woman, who they call Dani, has been living in one of these tents steps away from the city's makeshift shelter for weeks. According to those who live with her, they say she was complaining of the cold moments prior to suffering the seizure. And we still don't know the condition of that young lady who suffered that medical emergency. All we know is that she was taken to a local hospital. At Randall's Island, I'm Jessica Formoso, Fox 5 News.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, so what you have here is what I was telling you guys about, how some of these migrants, they're not equipped for the cold, right? They're so unequipped for the cold that, you know, they're suffering medical emergencies, right? I mean, this woman had a seizure. She was unconscious. I'm hoping and praying that she's okay. But when you talk about having single-age men taking up spaces in shelters, that should be space for women and children, okay? You shouldn't have any women and children out living in tents while you have grown men being placed in warm hotels and, you know, other sheltered facilities that are more suitable for keeping warm during the wintertime, right? It doesn't make sense. This is why I said that, you know, this whole process that we have here, the whole system is an absolute disaster, okay? But, you know, hey, it is what it is. You know, it's a terrible situation. It's a sad situation. But again, as you guys see, the Biden administration is hell-bent on continuing to allow it to happen, okay? They're hell-bent on doing everything they can to not secure the border. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.
You know, the migrant crisis is something that is touching everybody. It don't matter what side of the aisle you are on politics. It don't matter if you don't like to even discuss politics or anything like that. This issue is actually affecting everyone. This is a crisis that we're dealing with. Just like we had dealt with the pandemic, this is an issue. But this issue is a created issue. This isn't a natural phenomenon. It's created because the Biden administration wants open borders. And if you didn't believe that, recently, when Texas took away a portion of the border because Border Patrol wasn't stopping the people from coming into the country, Texas took about 2.5 miles of the border, put up razor wire, put up fences, and when they caught them trying to cross, they was arresting them. Biden wanted to go to the Supreme Court and also threatened Texas that if they don't remove that razor wire and those fences to keep letting these people come into the country, they threatened them with prosecution and lawsuits. Right there prove that the Biden administration has an open border policy that is hurting and affecting all people in this country. This country, if you don't have a sovereignty as a nation, if you don't have borders, if you don't have laws, rules, etc., then you don't have a nation. And that is destabilizing the nation. You're letting a bunch of men, and I'm going to keep on focusing on the men aspect. You're letting a bunch of military-age men come into this country, not a bunch of women and children, a bunch of military-age men who they don't know who they are. They're dumping their IDs, so you don't know who they are. So because some of them could be God knows who, could have been let out the, mental health facilities, could be having their jails empty. That's not the first time that's happened. Castro in Cuba did his jails all over Florida. So that's not the first time that would be done. But I want you to hear what Charlemagne, Charlemagne is quite shocked.
Nicolas Maduro, Hugo Chavez, may he rest in peace, long live Chavez. They take after Castro. because of what the U.S. is doing to them. But it's absolutely a fact that Venezuela opened their prisons and sent prisoners over here. That's a fact.
Shocked that a lot of people are really affected and talking about this migrant crisis and really upset about it. Let's go ahead and roll with Charlamagne gonna say.
I have the privilege, man, of doing morning radio and speaking to working class people every single day. I have the privilege of being involved in my community from New York to New Jersey to South Carolina, where I get to look people in the eyes and have real conversations with them, and people are really concerned about this issue. Like I honestly have never spoken to as many people who are concerned about the migrant issue as I have, over the past year. And I mean, I've heard everything from, the gang MS-13, overrunning neighborhoods. I've heard, what we saw just happened in New York City, where the migrants, they took 2,000 migrants and put them in the school and made the school stay home, made the students stay home and do school via Zoom. And that was a big issue. Like, I mean, people were calling the radio station, that was just this week, really, really, really complaining about that. So I've never seen, working class people who I interact with every day until this past year really, really, really express their frustration for the migrants. And it's not even just the people. Like, you see politicians who once, championed having the migrants in the city, like the mayor Eric Adams of New York. Now they're like, yo, hold up. This is too much. We've heard Vice President Kamala Harris say, hey, don't come. Like we've seen that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a real big issue. Go to those sound bites. They're going to go to those sound bites where they saw, the President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and Mayor Eric Adams and all of these other, liberals and Democrats. They're going to go to those sound bites of them welcoming them into sanctuary cities. And I mean, when Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott pulled that stunt where they were, shipping migrants to these sanctuary cities, dropping them off, right in front of, the vice president's house, as cruel as that was, as inhumane as that was, it was effective. Clearly it was effective, because it made a lot of those Democrats start singing a different tune. And I mean, the voters see that, the voters see that. And so what does that look like to the voter? Just on the surface, it looks like Republicans were right about the issue and Democrats got it wrong. And now a lot of Democrats are starting to sound like the Republicans sounded. So it makes a lot of people say, well, damn, Republicans were actually right on that issue. Just on the surface, just plain on the surface, that's how it looks, to the average voter.
Charlamagne. Why are you so surprised how people are feeling? Why are you so shocked how many, as you say, working class people are calling the show and going off about the migrants? The reason why you're shocked by this is because what y'all have to understand, the black elite, Boule, all that sort of people, the gatekeepers that Cat Williams was talking about, right? Which is always the black elite, the black Boule, right? They're so far removed from the problems that what we deal with as black people in the community or the rest of the country. Charlamagne, the reason why he don't understand it is because the migrants not going to his neighborhood. They won't let them in the neighborhood. His kids not being affected. His kids was not removed out of a school so migrants could be in there, right? So that's why he don't relate to that. That's why he's so shocked. But Charlamagne, either you're really not in the streets like you're talking about. You say you talk to people or whatever, but if you talk to people, then why don't you in New York? Why don't you go where the migrants are at? Take some cameras with you and go out there. You got a machine behind you, right? But you know good and well you can't do that because that machine that you work for is all in with the Democrat Party. We know that. Now, Charlamagne, let's talk about something. Maybe we can do a little, education or something going on in the city, and maybe you can go down there and find out what's going on. Let's put this new headline that just came up on the screen. NYC neighborhood turned into giant toilet as migrants litter park with poop, leave cups of urine on doorsteps. Charlemagne, that comes from the New York Post. Sir, you in New York City doing a show, and you mean to tell me you didn't know about this happening in New York? You're quite shocked about all the working class people. And let me tell you something. We're gonna go through this, but that in itself is a health crisis. You have to understand there are places, and y'all know what I'm talking about, throughout the world where they don't mind defecating in the street. They don't mind taking a peeing all over the place. In this society, we don't do that. And if you get caught, you go to jail, because you got to have a civilized nation. But when you sit up here and you just import people that's coming in who their own countries don't want, because you have to understand, all those countries those people coming from, there's a lot of people that's living there every day. You have the people who work hard every day and try to make their country great. You got the elite in their countries. So you better believe this isn't the elite or the working class people who got some pride within their nation, who's trying to make their nation a better place, who's trying to build a legacy for their people and their families. I respect those people. All the people that's still in Guatemala, all the people in Venezuela, all the people that's in Colombia, Mexico. They're saying people coming from West Africa, whether they Nigerian or they Ghanaian or wherever they coming from. There are plenty of people in that country every day that's fighting the good fight and trying to do what's right for their people. I respect all those nations of people. But what I don't respect is people gaming the system here. And it's not, once again, this isn't doctors coming across. This isn't scientists. This isn't engineers. It isn't, people who are architects or plumbers or no. These are people that's coming in. A lot of times we don't know what they got going on, but for sure they homeland say, yeah, you can go ahead and go. We don't need you here. Now let's get into this. So Charlemagne could maybe go find out about this. So they say migrants outside of an East Village intake center have been, they say, crappy neighbors. that's like a literally play on words. As they since November, thousands of adult migrants have waited outside the former St. Bridges School on East 7th Street and overflow into Tompkins Square Park to score a bed in the city shelter system after their 30-day and 60-day stay limits expired. But poop hit the fan and the sidewalks and the streets. Last week, when City Parks Department yanked a trio of porta potties from the park, they say the loos had become so filthy that workers gave up on maintaining them, according to locals. They said, and they quote, there was a cup of what I thought was somebody's discarded hot chocolate that turned out to not be hot chocolate, said a street cleaner, John Cashman. Y'all, that is the sickest thing I ever heard. Once again, that is going to create a health care crisis in New York City. That is a problem waiting to happen. That kind of environment, doing things like that. But this is what y'all voted for. When you vote for that Biden administration, and then I'll get to that. Let me go through this. They say, quote, on warmer days, it can smell like a toilet over here and not a well-kept toilet. They say in the past week, locals and volunteers said they spotted cups filled with urine around the park's entrance near the former school, along with human-sized poop in tree beds and between parked cars. Charlemagne, do you understand, brother, why people calling you upset? You understand now? Who wants to go walk to their car and see something like that? Who? They're supposed to be human beings, not dogs, not other animals, human beings. And look what they're doing. But Americans shouldn't be complaining about all this, right? Continue. Say, quote, most of them want to pee in plastic cups rather than the ground, and they leave them on people's doorsteps. said a longtime resident, Garrett Rosso, 64 years old, who said he spotted a dozen cups filled with urine. So now on top of they doing this, they're literally harassing and terrorizing people with urine and excrement. But Charlamagne, you didn't know any of this was going on? You so shocked and surprised? And Eric Adams, let's talk about you for a minute, Eric Adams. Man, you are one sorry mayor. Ain't no way I can be a mayor of a city like New York and not deal with that issue. Listen, you already had a rat infestation. That's the nastiest thing ever. Then on top of the rats, now you got this. This is horrible. New York City is literally turning into the garbage dumpster. Literally. All because these Democrat mayors won't stand up and say, hey, look, okay, enough's enough. This city is not a sanctuary city no more. If you come here, I'm going to send you right over there to with the governor. If she want to say sanctuary, she can. But you're not coming to NYC no more. Oh, no. Matter of fact, I'm calling Greg Abbott today and say, look, Governor Abbott, we have put a proclamation. We're no longer a sanctuary city. Don't send them here. I'm letting you know that right now. Because I'm shipping them away from here as we speak. I'm putting them on buses and sending them over there with the governor. And she could deal with them. But they ain't going to be here no more. See, that's what, and trust me, if Eric Adams did something like that, oh, he would win a re-election so quick because people would be happy with him. They'll be very happy if you, but y'all so committed to this Democrat agenda that's harming America. I said America. It's harming everybody. It's harming Democrats. It's harming Republicans. And remember, Charlamagne even was admitting that Democrats now are saying, all right, man, yeah, I was all for welcoming people and all that, but come on, man, this is a little too much. And the fact that Charlamagne has said that, well, what Desantis and what Governor Abbott has been doing, oh, it's basically been genius. No, this is the issue. Forever, Texas, especially Texas, have been dealing with this migrant issue for decades. Governor Abbott is the only one to say, hey, okay, you sanctuary cities, you want to welcome them? I got some migrants for you. And you can go in on and they can go to your city. Because why is it that Texas taxpayers has to brunt all our tax dollars and resources going to people that just coming over here when you have a president in office that believe in an open border policy? Once again, when he made threats at Texas about opening that border back up so they could come across here, he exposed his hand at that point. Now, let's continue. It's a one migrant. It's a had no problem taking, it's a whiz on a tree Wednesday afternoon as the Post. They said surveyed the stomach churning scene. And say the southeastern part of the park was also littered with spilled food and plastic containers. They say, quote, I've cut this part of the park out of my daily walk because of the filth, said a neighbor, Michael Barley, 73 years old. He said there's several thousand people coming to this end of the park with no place to use the bathroom. Susan Stetzer, district manager of the Community Board 3, said park workers, they say, removed the Tompkins porta potties last week because they were being trashed to the point they could not be maintained. The portable bathrooms were installed in Tompkins last year to provide relief while the park's field house is undergoing an 18-month renovation. They say the migrants, mostly from West Africa and South America, and who are among the more than 100,000 who've been in the city's care since spring 2022, said they've been blocked by intake center staff from using the building's restrooms. They said when we want to go to the toilet, they said the retake center, sometimes people tell you no, said one man who gave his name as Abu Salim. He said, you have to go out here. So a park spokesperson said porta potties are difficult to maintain and clean. It said, but that a public restroom operated by the agency was available at McKinley Playground, roughly 7 minutes away. It said a spokesperson for the mayor's office said they were aware of the complaints regarding a lack of showers and bathrooms, but added that many migrants are choosing to line up when they don't have to. So many are sleeping outside and standing on line despite space as short-term holding centers. Now, let me center back to all these boule. Notice the Congressional Black Caucus have not. This is Congressional Black Caucus with the migrant crisis. That's them. Crickets, not saying a word about the migrant crisis. You're supposed to be the Congressional Black Caucus, and you're not talking about how the migrants are being put in the black community, especially in Chicago. You're not talking about, we already a community that's disadvantaged as a collective. We don't get the resources we need. We definitely need reparations, but we don't get the resources that we need as it is. And they're putting migrants in the black communities. We've been there before. During the Vietnam War, they were putting Vietnamese all in the black communities. I remember seeing the constant flow of Vietnamese in the 80s. I remember seeing them constantly coming into the black communities, getting homes, getting businesses in the black communities, getting shrimp boats. I remember all that. And we didn't know back then like we know now, but we know that the U.S. government was giving them money for businesses, giving them money for food, paying their place to stay. That's why these groups come in here and get above you so quick, because they're literally getting the assistance to do it. They're not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. We're told to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And the Congressional Black Caucus know about all these programs. Look, y'all have to listen. Listen to me. The Congressional Black Caucus know about every program these migrants or any of these other people are getting. They know. They're part of Congress. They know what they're getting. They won't tell me and you how we can get into that program. They won't tell us to say, hey, we need a black version of Edward Bloom over here, and we need to start suing the government about those programs since black Americans can't get it. See, they won't do that. They won't. They will collect their checks. They will be corrupt. They bought and paid for, and they will watch the entire black community go down the drain. They don't care. As long as they're good, they can go stay in the same neighborhood as their white liberal friends. That's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. Once again, the silence of the Congressional Black Caucus with the migrant crisis. They won't say a word. The mayors in these cities, all for it, supporting it. They just begging for Biden them to give them money so they can keep on taking care of the people. But this is a Democrat policy that they're doing. I told y'all before, nothing can happen to black people in this nation without the assistance of black people. When we all on code, notice how they start moving around and changing different things. Give example. The delineation movement that's happening right now. You see how nervous everybody's getting about that delineation movement? Why? Because when black folks get on code and it's a leaderless movement and everybody's saying the same thing at the same time, or they trying to draw us into conflicts that has nothing to do with black America, and we like, nah, we ain't got nothing to do with us. We focusing on us right now. And how people are getting upset. People are say, what's going on? Why black people not talking about this? Why doing this? Why do? It's not our issue, not our problem. Every group have burned us when we try to assist. So we're saying, hey, you do you, right? That's bothering people. We look at this issue right now that's going on, Charlemagne, and this is why in Georgia, you got 20% of people right now talking about voting Trump and 10% of black people saying they voting the couch. That's why. And Trump getting closer and closer to nomination because Ron DeSantis, as of today, dropped out of the presidential race. And he was number 2 in Iowa. If anybody should have dropped out, Nikki Haley should have dropped out because she was number 3, but she thinking her rabbit mind, Nimrata, not Nikki, Nimrata, that's her name. Saw something interesting about her. She was cheating on her husband and everything. Like, wow, Nimrata. You know, you say there's not a racist country, but then you got videos saying that you got a black son-in-law? Nimrata? Okay. But that woman there that's why nobody gonna take her seriously. But this migrant crisis is definitely number one. And then after the migrant crisis, people gonna talk about the economy. That's the two major things that everybody on one accord is talking about. And you Democrats, especially the Congressional Black Caucus, you keep playing games. You can do all the shaming you want. You can do all the cussing you want. It's not going to work. You can ancestor shame. You can do that too. It's not going to work. All you're saying about Trump, oh my God, Trump, he's going to do this to America. Trump didn't have an open border policy though. When Trump was in office, we had money in our pocket. Trump talking about when he get back in office, he's drilling the first day he get back in, and he trying to get them gas prices down to $2. I don't know about you, but I want that. Gas is affecting everybody's pocketbook. All that, you can't say, well, put me in office because I'm not him. You only had one time to do that. And now it's worse because you had 3 years, almost 4 years to show how you were so much better than the other guy. And now Americans are worse off. We literally have been invaded. It's an invasion. But it's not an invasion like they came in, they overtook our military and all that. No. This was hey, just come on in. Nobody stops you. Just come on in. Then come over here arrogant, telling black folk no money for you. You're lazy. Where they get that from? So Charlemagne, you know what's going on, Charlemagne. No, don't play dumb, bro. Don't play dumb. Come on, you more educated than that. You are way more educated than that. The deal is, and I've been hearing lately, Charlemagne, that the Democrats been kind of mad at you here lately. Here lately, I've been hearing that, Charlemagne, Democrats upset because you're talking a little too much. And they don't like that. Now, Charlemagne, you're not free like I am. You too tied in with them. And one thing, Charlemagne, you better understand about racism, white supremacy, Charlemagne, is that if they let you in, they're gonna break you. And they already got some dirt on you already. They already got dirt on you because this is the way it goes with them. They don't let you get a certain height with them if they don't have dirt on you. That way they can use it to break you and to take everything from you. They don't want nobody around them that's too squeaky clean. That's what I've learned about racism, white supremacy. Period. Or if they can't get you that way, they just want to have you in a vulnerable position or have you feeling that everything you do, if it's not through their system, you can't do nothing. Basically, they fire you from the Breakfast Club. They fire you from everything that you got, that you can't build nothing on your own. Some people can build on their own, like Shannon Sharp. He got let go. He got his podcast going. He do First Take as a part-time thing, but Shannon don't need none of them, right? And I like to see brothers that do things like that, and sisters. But the migrant crisis is the number one issue in America. The number one. Last election, it was the pandemic. This time, it's the migrant crisis. But once again, nobody in this country, or even Trump himself, opened the door and let that in during the pandemic. Biden opened up the door from day one. So when you hear people like Tiffany Cross talking about she's going to go vote for Biden, and Angela Rye talking about she's going to go out there and vote for Biden, that's what they're voting for. They're voting for more cups of excrement to be at your door. That's what they're voting for. Because at this point, if you go vote for Biden, then you're complicit just as much as he is. At this point, you're voting for open borders. You're voting for invasion. You're voting for it. And if you go out and vote for that mess in the next election, I don't want to hear you complaining no more. I don't want to hear nothing. I don't want to hear nothing at all from you. Like, don't come tell me nothing because that's what you voted for and you like it. So get ready with your new neighbors. Open up your doors. Don't be surprised next. Them Democrats gonna try to force some of y'all that got big houses to start sheltering them. Or some of you landlords that got houses that may be sitting, they may start forcing y'all to start letting them stay in your rent houses. Listen, when it comes to the Democrats, I told you they are the authoritarian Democrats. To me, they are not about no doggone democracy. When they showed me in Chicago that they don't even want the citizens to vote if they want the sanctuary city or not, that was, I say, okay, they're not for democracy. And I know people say, well, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. Well, tell people that then. Stop using the word democracy and just say we're a republic. And we got some elements of democracy, but we're really not a democracy. Just tell people that. But more and more as we go along, and you're going to see more and more of the elite class in the black community in the CBC. And I saw Ayanna Pressley the other day trying to keep talking about more migrants and things like that. Ayanna Pressley is not living in no area the migrants going to bother her. She lives in a good area with her friends, her white friends. She is not dealing with that. I'm telling y'all, you do good not to take no cues from a Charlemagne, from a black politician at this point, a black mayor, because they're not for us like that. They're proving it. They're for the Democrat Party.
Cultfigga, follow me.